Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the rest of you, and welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I'm your host, Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement, and I'm joined by my co-host, P. How goes it, P?
Fantastic as always. Man, we got some shit to talk about today.
We have
First,
Go ahead.
I mean, we've been talking about it already before we started. Let's talk about the fucking CPI numbers.
Yes, but just real quick, we're trying to be organized on the show. Bear with us because we're not organized people, so you're learning it in real time. Today's episode, news and notes. We'll be talking a lot about inflation, as P has mentioned. Then we'll have an interview with NVK, creator of Coldcard, and we'll be talking a lot just about the world, what he's building, and what he's looking forward to. And we're going to end today's episode with an interview with Craig Raw and talking about some multi-sig stuff. But let's kick it off now with some news and notes. As much as I want to talk about the Trump, Elon, Twitter, Truth Social feud going on, I guess I can't. Although all I will say on that note is Elon could just spend the $44 billion on Bitcoin. So there you go. I made that new story about Bitcoin to appease the powers that be. At the same time, I'm just looking forward to seeing this trial play out with Twitter and Elon, and that's it. That's all I'm going to say about it. Let's talk about the big story that is trending all over Twitter. If you have not yet seen, inflation has finally come in, and they are saying that we have 9.1 CPI, Consumer Price Index inflation, year over year. This is about 0.3% higher than what they had originally anticipated. I don't give a shit what they have to say. Inflation's not 9.1%. They'll blend it with a whole lot of other things. But Chris, if we could pull up that chart where inflation is shown for each different product category, I want to highlight specifically first the gas prices. It says 59.9%. Thank you. Zoom in a little bit. All right, cool. So energy services, which is like down in the middle, go look at that column all the way on the right, and that'll show you year over year inflation for each different product category. Gasoline, all types, 59.9%. Now, mind you, that is across the country. As a California resident, we're zoom it out just like a little bit because it cut off that last column, Chris. But then do whatever you just did after that, because that was beautiful. Yeah, perfect. There we go.
Nailed
so yeah,
it.
you have 59.9% inflation in gas. You have almost 100% for fuel that is oil. And I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, that includes things like, the fuel used for airlines and airplanes. Like, this is nuts. This is nuts when you actually break it up categorically and you see something like medical care commodities coming in at 3.2%, or all items less food and energy coming in at 5.9%. Those are the lower ones. Apparel coming in at 5.2%. Like, that stuff doesn't matter, unfortunately. Like, you know what? I can go a year without buying new clothes. I just can. You know what? I've gone, I think at this point now, 3 years without really buying new clothes. And I'm going to keep that streak going for a little bit longer, at least. You know what I can't go without? Even though I don't fucking own a car in Los Angeles, I can't go without gas. Because if I borrow someone's car, I got to fill it back up for them. So this is disheartening. I'm not surprised in any way. I think this came in around my expectations of higher inflation, a number that's getting spun and introduced as it's not that bad, when you actually like just pull the curtain back a little bit. Like, we're not really in the weeds at this right now. This is less than ideal. And the people who we have in charge of dealing and curtailing this issue have come out and admit that they don't really know or understand what's going on. I mean, Jim Cramer said this is peak inflation, so take that information as you will. I have now since ate more boxes of sriracha as a result. Um, what are your guys' initial thoughts just on this inflation readout chart we've shown? And P is still
Oh my
muted. So
God,
we're gonna
Jesus. All right, here we go. Never again. You will never see me muted again. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, man. It's fucking wild. The thing that I always come back to is, as we talked about, the CPI is a manufactured statistic. The things that are in the CPI basket are explicitly chosen to present a specific narrative, because if CPI doesn't follow the narrative that the Fed and the United States government wants it to follow, bad things happen. So the thing that is really interesting to me, the thing that's crazy to me, is if they're telling us that it's above 9%. When was the last time it was above 9%, Q? Do you know?
I believe it was the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, it was at least like 40, 45 years ago, at least. Yeah.
So if they're telling us that it's that high, it means that in reality, it is significantly higher. And so the real question for me is like, what are they trying to tell everyone by allowing it to be above 9%? Like, what is going on in their minds? What are they trying to, set expectations for? But it's fucking crazy. I mean, as I said, it's got to be, I would probably say double that number, but let's say it is at least in reality, half again higher than what they're giving us now. But it's very strange times.
To clarify, it seems actually it was in the 80s that we had inflation at this level, early to mid 80s, and then yeah, I mean, look, this is to P's point, like the number that they're not telling us, the numbers that they avoid talking about, I think are more telling than the numbers that they're willing to say. And look, I hope none of my high school or middle school teachers are watching this, but if you are, thank you. Anytime I was asked in high school to grade my own paper and then turn it in, like, what do you fucking think I did? I fucking changed the answer. I, of course, changed the answer. Like, let's not kid ourselves. And you did too. And if you say you didn't, I call you, you're full of shit, P. You're full of shit.
I think you just admitted to a federal crime live on camera.
The point I'm trying to make is like, that is just human instinct, unfortunately. And so now translate that out of high school or middle school homework assignment and translate that into your job, your career, your reputation on the line. And you are now the one who is supposed to grade yourself and then share with the rest of the world how you did. Come on. Like, come the fuck on. I don't buy any of this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's obviously they can't like hide the fact that prices are going up, but they can certainly, manipulate the numbers a little bit. And again, it's just like it's very significant they're allowing it to be this high. I think also, to your point earlier, like the fact that fuel prices are so high, I mean, that has significant ramifications for so many areas of industry and so many other costs. If fuel costs go up significantly, that then affects the prices of food because it costs more to ship things across the country. And so, I mean, it has a lot of knockdown effects. And I guess in theory, this is supposed to capture all of that, but I don't think it does at all. I don't know. What do you think?
No,
how hard is Daddy Powell trying to fuck us?
I mean, to be honest, like he could use a little bit more lube because this is just really rough right now. You bring up an excellent point. I remember seeing this video of a trucker who's driving, I believe it was a dairy truck of just milk. And he was explaining it cost him over $1,000 USD to fill up his tank with gas. And he was talking about how like the price of the milk I'm taking now to the grocery stores is not reflective of how much I'm now spending at the gas pump. Mind you, this was like 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Prices have been steadily going up. And at this point, we're probably starting to feel the effect of that gas pump. But prices didn't go down. If anything, gas has held steady for some time. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, we're now back below $100 a barrel, I believe. Is that accurate?
It broke below. I think it's back hovering above it. It was like 105 last I checked, but it broke like to 99 or 98 recently, like within the last 2 days.
I mean, on the topic of oil, it's really going to just come down to how we end up handling, or how OPEC Plus and Russia handle the US sanctions. And I put sanctions in quotes because I just think at this point they're just bullshit. If we actually wanted to do something about Russia, like we would have forcibly taken their seat away from OPEC Plus, but they're still there. They're still making decisions. And the truth of the matter is, if Russia is to turn around and cut the oil it contributes to the rest of the world, we could be looking at 180 to almost $300-$400 per barrel of oil, depending on how much Russia cuts down on the oil that they contribute to the rest of the world.
Wait,
So,
really? You think it could go that high?
yeah, I was reading a calculation that was kind of explaining that if they cut 1 million barrels of production, the price of oil can go as high as $180 a barrel. And if they cut up to 5 million barrels of production, it can go as high as $380 a barrel.
Jesus.
So like this is
Wait, but is that feasible though? Like I genuinely don't know. Like, is that something that is a possibility? Like, what are the ramifications for them?
the question really is, how seriously does OPEC want to take these sanctions? And how aggressive does the US want to be at enforcing these sanctions? That's really what it starts. It's all posturing at this point. It's truly a bunch of old, mostly white men standing in a room with massive egos trying to flex one last fucking time before they all get sent to the old folks home and we can be done with this nonsense of being led by senile 70 and 80-year-old fucking idiots. Sorry. I'm not supposed to curse a lot, and I apologize to the children who are watching this. This is a children's program, but by the way, do not take any financial advice from us. Do your own due diligence.
Yeah, I think it is really important that we watch what we, say, because children could be watching. I just wanted to say, when you were talking about the trucker, talking about the cost to ship milk, what I thought you were going to say was, there's a trucker doing an interview and just right behind him is Jerome Powell fucking him. I think it's an image that'll stick with you. So thanks for putting it in my head, Q.
In case you were wondering, P is so rich that he actually is not affected by inflation. So that's why he can sit here and joke about things like that. But Chris and I are here for you. Chris and I are the real plebs of this show and program who feel your pain. Do not fall for the elitism of P and his insect milk.
Bro, we talked about this. You're totally wrong. That's the answer. I get all the sustenance I need from the insects that I milk on a daily basis. And that gives me what I want. So I don't need to be worried about your fucking food costs because I'm just over here suckling on those insect teats. But what else? So we talked about OPEC. What other ramifications do you think this CPI print has for the economy? How does this change potentially the actions of the Fed? Does it change their actions? Does it support their actions?
So I think my expectation right now is a very significant rate hike yet again, expecting something like 75 basis points. I believe it was the Bank of Canada that actually had a 100 basis point rate hike today. So that's a whole percentage point for people who don't necessarily understand what a basis point is when people say that. Like when I say 75 basis point hike, that's 0.75% increase. I think the Fed is going to continue to respond the way they do. I'm paying more attention right now to unemployment because I do unfortunately think we're coming up on a period where the layoffs that you're seeing in the tech sector and a lot more white collar jobs are going to really start to pick up. And it's worrisome because the economy doesn't read that. But when you start to like actually dissect some of these numbers, I'm getting really sick of this narrative of like, oh, there's 4 available jobs for every 1 job hunter. It's like, no, there's not. There's like 3.5 available blue collar jobs for every 1 person who's trying to find a job. And the truth is I believe it's something like 30 or 40% of these people who are looking for work are specifically white collar workers looking for new white collar job opportunities. So like the excessive amount of job openings is not actually, it does not properly relate back to what the people are looking for as far as work goes. So as that spread widens of the more people who become unemployed and the less job openings there are, that's when I think the Fed is going to have to reverse their stance. I think, like, I'm looking right now quickly at the market, and mind you, like, I don't really pay attention to the market on day of what the market does on days like this, other than to just make sure like there's nothing drastic happening, and there isn't. You have the Nasdaq kind of trading in this weird zone. It's up like 0.1% now. S&P is up 0.23. You have really not really high, but just like significant increase in volume. Mind you, volume's been trending down. We're in the middle of summer, so I think the market expected this. The market expected a less than 10% CPI readout. The market is expecting a 75 basis point hike. And so long as those things kind of happen, the Fed isn't going to alter their stance, because in their eyes, so long as the market doesn't do anything too crazy or drastic that we're not necessarily expecting, we're on the right track. So whether or not I agree with that doesn't matter. It's ultimately what the Fed is going to do. It's going to be, I think, a lot more pain. I've been very bearish for some time, and I kind of wholeheartedly agree with what Dr. Jeff Ross was saying yesterday on one of the Twitter spaces that I was listening in on yesterday. Like, there's more downside to come. I at least believe in the general markets. And I also genuinely believe that the correlation between the markets and Bitcoin, at least, has not broken. And so I'm not going to, until that connection is broken, I'm not going to believe that Bitcoin's price is going to necessarily go up or even stay where it's at, while I believe the general market will continue to deteriorate.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I was seeing stuff after the CPI print was announced this morning that the Fed's already posturing that there's going to be 150 basis points hike combined over the next two meetings. So whether it's 1% hike and then 50 basis points hike, or it's 275s, remains to be seen. But that's what they're already talking about to try and basically quell this CPI number and inflation that we're seeing right now. I agree with what like Jeff says. You know, he hates being bearish, but he's still bearish with everything that he's seeing. It's interesting, his thesis, because he says just because Bitcoin's gone down in price now to hovering at like, what are we, 20K, 19K right now, doesn't mean it has to keep going down. I will caveat that and say that at some point people will be forced to sell continuously as things get worse. If they have bills to pay, if they're like just trying to cut their losses, if they're fleeing to cash, even if they are Bitcoiners and they have bills to pay. I mean, that's just the reality. If you're on the get on zero crew, or people that only hold Bitcoin and sell it as you need it to pay off bills, you're selling your Bitcoin at a less and less USD price. So you have to spend more and more Bitcoin or sats in order to pay that same bill that you have. That's potentially going up in price. Your energy bill might be going up. Your fuel costs are definitely going up. Your food costs are going up. So it's very interesting. I think Bitcoin's price will get hampered more. I don't know if it goes to 10K. I don't know if it goes to 12K. I don't know if we hover at 19K. But yeah, I think there is more pain in all markets. I think Bitcoin included as well.
P, what are you thinking about? This is the quietest you've been in some time, so.
He's still muted.
Jesus fucking Christ. All right. I no, man, I'm just pensive. I'm thinking about what this means for not only the U.S. economy, but also the world economy. I'm trying to think what ramifications this has, since we are the world reserve currency. With rising interest rates, it's this game of chicken, right? Because when we raise interest rates, other countries then are like, oh shit, like they got to raise interest rates too, and everything kind of affects everything else. So now I'm curious, how is the Bank of Japan reacting to this? I'm sure they got a sort of warning or a notice, or they're correctly interpreting whatever the fuck Fed the Fed is saying. But I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on that. Like, how does this affect the world stage, the larger macroeconomic environment?
Chris, let's pull up the one with the chart with every single different country's CPI. I mean, I think, and to be honest, actually, like this isn't necessarily as helpful in my opinion as something like the Dixie, the DXY, and referencing back our conversation with the Bitcoin Magazine Pro guys, Dylan and Sam. The fact that the Dixie is getting stronger is not because the US dollar is somehow becoming this like strengthening currency around the world. No, it's deteriorating and weakening. It's just doing it at a slower pace when compared to things like the euro and the Japanese yen, which account for, I believe, over 60% of how the Dixie is calculated. So when you have something like the Japanese yen, which we know has just completely been getting demolished over the last few months, and you have something like the euro, which I believe is now it's a 1-to-1 parity. This is insane. So I think in a weird way, you can see something like the Dixie, combine your knowledge of inflation, look at a chart like this and see, okay, the US is saying 9.1% inflation. You have, Chris, if you can zoom in a little bit, Eurozone says 8.6, Netherlands says 8.6, Mexico says 8. You even have a place like China saying 2.5%, which, I mean, if you don't believe the data out of the US, like you're definitely not going to believe the data out of China. So grain of salt with all of this, of course, but it's what I find interesting and to a degree almost confusing is the fact that you see some of these countries with less inflation than the US has, but their currency is deteriorating at a faster rate until you stop and realize that their currency is actually tied to the dollar. So, like, while we may not be on a gold standard, there are a lot of countries on a dollar standard. Like, imagine how fucked you are at that point. So that in turn is what we're kind of bearing witness to, and it's a game of global chicken right now. Japan will probably be the first domino chip to fall, and what that will cause in Eastern Europe, what that will cause throughout Asia as a result, what that'll cause here in America remains to be seen. If I fucking knew that, I would tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl, and I would have literally bet my entire stack on that. So, like, I'm not necessarily trying to sit here and say like this is exactly what's going to happen, just based on the context clues that are out there. There doesn't seem to be like there's anything positive to help push us forward. Now, let's remove that aspect of it and just think what historically has the US done in a period of, let's just say, recession, economic downturn. Well, they pump more liquidity into the market. That whole idea or the concept that everyone keeps saying on Twitter of like, when's the Fed going to reverse their position? Like, that's essentially what the conversation is around. When is the Fed going to pump liquidity back into the markets to prop it back higher? Because they either have to do that or they have to be willing to cause the Great Depression 2.0. Great Depression 2022. I don't know. Trying some things out because, you know, it's inevitably going to be a thing that's trending on Twitter later.
Because you said it, of course.
No, only because I said it on this show, for no other reason. Not because there's actually the potential risk of Great Depression 2.0 2022.
Someone brought up a good point. It's like, why are we using the CPI numbers? It's just basically, this is what they're reporting on the streets. Someone else said in the comments that Shadow Stats is reporting 18% year over year inflation. So the government reported inflation is 19.1. The Shadow Stats is 18%.
9.1.
Or yeah, so 9.1, and the Shadow Stats is showing 18.0.
What's the status on that website that
Chapwood
was
Index?
down?
No idea. It went down actually like a while ago, and I don't know. But to the person's point, like, you're absolutely right. As I was saying at the beginning, the CPI is a manufactured statistic. It's changed significantly over the years. There are things that make sense to change about it when people's like actual buying habits change and adapt over time. But it is also specifically designed to support whatever narratives the government needs to be pushing. So you're absolutely right to ask that question. We talked about Shadow Stats yesterday. As I said, I think the number is much higher, but the interesting thing is, what is the government signaling with this high of an inflation print? Because it's still very high.
Yeah, and even it's funny. So they are manufacturing the number, and it's still going up. So like that shows you how bad things are. Do you guys remember last 4th of July? They didn't do it this year. They're like, "Hey guys, you're saving like 30 cents on your barbecue for 4th of July if you just have beans, string beans, and like water. You're good. It's not more expensive than it was last year. Fuck your hot dogs, fuck your hamburgers. You're not allowed to
Yep.
have those. They're more expensive. Wheat, bread, yeah, that was more expensive too. So no buns. Like,
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. But again, it's all about printing those headlines, right? Because the headline is the thing that gets picked up by everybody. Everybody's like, oh yeah, cool, I guess inflation's fine.
But it was so bad this year, they couldn't even do that again for this year because beans and green beans were up this year or something like that. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, man.
I just want to know, when will the price of airline tickets go to more reasonable levels, and also just rent? Because I have a friend trying to move out of his parents' basement. So trying to really help this guy gauge when would be the best time to sign a new lease.
Are you that guy, Q? Are you that?
I said, I'm asking for a friend, Chris. Like, do you even listen to anything I say? But like, in all seriousness, there is something really important. Like, while we're talking about worst case scenario, while we are talking about the Depression or possible Great Depression 2.0, that's not necessarily the only outcome that's possible. There's a very real, and probably, if we want to be probabilistic about everything we're talking about, I'm probably putting Great Depression 2.0 at like 20%. And I'm frankly putting another pump of liquidity into the markets at like 60%. When exactly that happens remains to be seen. I'll be really, really interested, Chris, to your point, if we do actually see 150 basis point rate hikes over the span of the next 2 months, over the course of the next 2 Fed meetings, that will take our interest rate level to about 3%, which now we are approaching the level that Stanley Druckenmiller. I always forget how to.
Stanley Druckenmiller, you're correct.
Thank you. Like, he has warned, I believe the exact number he had calculated with 3.74% is the absolute cap on what our interest rate could be before we just can't afford the interest payments on issuing that type of bond going forward. So we're very quickly reaching that point of capitulation, in my opinion, of what happens if we actually try to go over that threshold. Like, what can potentially happen to the US dollar in that type of a scenario actually terrifies me. Because if we walk step by step through what he's trying to explain in that scenario, it is, we'll issue a bond with a promise of a return at this level, but because of how much debt that we have to be paying off already exists on our balance sheet, introducing interest payments that are that much more than what we're paying now on bonds it takes our payments just over this level where we can't afford based on how much money we're coming in. And then you want to start talking about things like paying off my student loan debt, or I don't know, introducing yet another bill for infrastructure, or just sending more money to Ukraine. Like, none of this money should be spent right now. Absolutely none. Sorry. Or Bitcoiner hat on, spend all the fucking money you want so you can actually ruin and destroy the dollar and Bitcoin can reign supreme.
Yeah, man. Crazy times.
We've gone really long on this, so I didn't even get to talk about the fact that food is more expensive at home than it is out. But
no, let's keep going, man.
I mean, is MVK here?
Nope, not yet. I'll get it.
Oh, I thought he was here. Okay, fine. So in that earlier chart that we showed, also, I want to make sure I have these numbers correct. I believe it was the price year over year for food at home has gone up 12.2%, while the price for food, like going out to eat, is at 7.8. I'm pulling it up right now as we speak. Sorry, bear with me. 7.7. Oh, so close. Food away from home, 7.7. Food at home, 12.2%. look, everyone complains about how the cost of food at grocery stores has gone up. We all feel it. At a certain point, it actually, I mean, look, is it cheaper to go to McDonald's and poison your body instead of going to a grocery store? Yes, it probably for the rest of our lives will be that. Um, and how much of that is by design? Well, let me tell you, fast food companies have lobbyists in DC. You know who doesn't have lobbyists in DC? Your local meat farmers, your local crop farmers, even. Like, none of them are lobbying in DC the same way the fast food conglomerates lobby in DC. You want to know how I can tell you that? Why is it you can walk into Jack in the Box and pay with food stamps, but I can't go to somewhere like Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Safeway, and buy just like the normal things I want to, or actually you probably could at somewhere like Safeway. But to be honest, like, there's a larger issue with the fact that you can buy fast food items with food stamps and say whatever you want about it. The fact that the government is willingly letting its citizens poison their bodies when there are better, cheaper alternatives available says everything you didn't know about what these people's priorities really are. Let's cut to a commercial break, though, and we'll be joined by MVK. And just a quick reminder, lock in your tickets to Bitcoin Amsterdam before prices go up next Friday. Come party with us. And yeah, you know the drill. It's Amsterdam. I'll be there. You know what I'll be doing. We'll be back after this.
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Number one Bitcoin Magazine. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Number one Bitcoin Magazine. Samba.
I pulled a P. Welcome back, guys. And I'm excited to introduce our guest for today, but I'll let P give him a proper introduction. We made an exception for our guests. We usually require them to come down to just one letter to come onto this show, but we've given NVK all three of his letters. P, could you give him a proper introduction?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, he hardly needs an introduction. NVK has created I would say the most well-known hardware device in the Bitcoin space. He's created the Coldcard and many other products around it. But one of the things that I think is so interesting about NVK's approach is he always chooses security and effectiveness of the tool over the UX. He does an amazing job of combining them, but I'm really excited today to talk about how he makes those decisions and the thinking behind it. So NVK, welcome to the show. You are a huge part of the Bitcoin space. Get in here. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, no, you're pulling a P.
Hang on.
There we go. We can hear you.
There you go. Hey, man, it's been a while, dude.
I know.
Yeah, the sweetest voice in the Bitcoin space. So yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This is I hope we have a good chat.
Yeah, I'm super excited, man. And just for the audience, the reason that my mute unmute situation is so fucked recently is because they're doing road construction like directly outside my window. So I'm constantly trying to like figure out how to like, okay, mute, unmute, and I keep fucking it up. So apologies. But
It's fine. You're just smooth brained.
yeah, it's fair enough. Fair enough. So yeah, I mean, NDK, what would you add to your story? I didn't give the full spectrum of who you are and what you're about. Do you want to do that for our audience, just so that everybody knows how fucking awesome you are?
I mean, I'm kind of irrelevant in a way. We have a team of people, and I was sort of because I was pre-doxed, I end up just being the face of the company all the time. But we are a very tiny team, but mighty. And we've been building hardware for Bitcoin since I think our first Bitcoin project was 2011, and then I think 2012 was probably when we started like doing actual hardware. We built Bitcoin HSMs back then. We built a block explorer back then. We did a lot of stuff. Maybe many people, if they've been in the space for a while, they have had CoinKite's debit cards. We used to have payment machines and debit cards that function as an exchange as well. They were all over the world for a while. 2014 was a little too early for those. What else? I mean, we had a web wallet for a long time. That was the backend for many exchanges, even BitMax, way back then. Yeah, we've been in this space for a while, and notably these days, everybody seems to be really into the OpenDime, the Blockclock, the Coldcard. Our NFC cards are coming, and a pile more of stuff. We
Wait,
we just like building stuff.
Did you just say biomorph?
No. A
Okay.
bunch more of stuff.
Okay, I was gonna say, what the fuck does that mean? And I want one.
You can get a Brazilian out of Brazil, but you can't get the accent out anymore.
I love it. Yeah, man. I mean, I don't want to like blow too much smoke up your ass, but I think you've been in the space for a significant amount of time, and as I referenced earlier, I'd love to hear about sort of how you and your team make the design decisions that you do. Because do you think it's accurate to was I accurate when I said that you guys choose security and kind of effectiveness of the tool over like UX? Whenever those two things are in conflict,
Yes.
it's the other one, which is an unusual choice.
So I think there is a few things that because most people who make products are not exposed to hardware development, they oftentimes they do it as a hobby with a kit that they take, and so they have to inherit the kit's set of trade-offs. Very few companies in this space do the hardware from scratch, right? So that gives us a lot more room to do the things the way we want. So that's why products tend to have a certain way of looking and being that are different than your standard sort of consumer electronics. And I think the main thing for us is we build products for ourselves primarily, right? It's like, is this the thing I want to use every day? That is the question we ask ourselves, and that's how we build the products, right? And the products are built to be truly utilitarian, but we joke that they need to have a personality and at least one joke in them. So we don't ship something unless there is a joke in them too. That's just how we are. We're super utilitarian, sort of like we're not gamers. We're sort of like, like we're not like, we're kind of weird people. And but we have a sense of humor, and the products have to have it. So like is it the shape of the OpenDime? Is it the ECC calculator on Coldcard? Is it the Satoshi quotes on the Blockclock? Everything has to sort of like respect that sort of framework that we have for things. It's like, does it accomplish that? Not just accomplish it, does it thrive on that specific functionality that we intend the thing for, right? And some people know that some of us are amateur radio operators as well, so we like a lot of knobs and buttons. That translates into some how products are. Um, we we think that we should expose as much function and options and settings to the users. We don't treat users like stupid people. What we do though is we find ways to prevent ourselves and our users from making mistakes, right? So Coldcard is essentially the only hardware wallet that does a lot of checks, on say change outputs and a bunch of stuff, so that you can't just easily get duped into something, or you can't just easily make a mistake. We have sort of like sanity checks on everything. And that's sort of and that's a security approach, right? Like it's very layered. So there is security, making sure users don't screw something up, even though they have a lot of options and features. We check also to make sure that addresses are right and all that stuff. We make sure that the menus have an explanation of what is it, right? And we don't try to hide Bitcoin from the users. We want the users to understand what's going on, because see, you could take the approach, say for example Ledger, right? Fantastic team. I know those guys. They care about what they do, but their approach is sort of like hide everything, right? But then the problem is their users go and they get a private message saying, "Hey, send me your seed. I'm here to help you," right? And they don't know what the seed is. They don't understand what's going on, so they go and they send the seed, right? So in every step of the way on how you set up your Coldcard, you can do it in like 30 seconds, where you just plug it in and it generates a seed, and boom, you have a wallet, right? Just like every other easy wallet out there. Or you can take it all the way to full on tinfoil cypherpunk mode, where you're checking the firmware, you're rebuilding, you're checking the components, you're throwing dice, you're doing all this stuff, right? The OpenDime is the same, right? Like, we don't want you to trust us, so we ask you to dump a file in, so we use that file provably to generate the private key. And that's also very selfish too. I just don't want to get kidnapped, right? If I had a product that was fully trusted on us, we would be a point of capture, and that wouldn't be very safe to us, right? So we try to build things with this mindset, where just being very pragmatic, utilitarian, and then try to create a product that we can manufacture in the scale that we do, which is not small, but it's not like Samsung, right? I mean, we make products for Bitcoiners, and we're at the mercy of the Bitcoin market size. So we try to sort of like find this very, very fine balance on how can we do that? How can we deliver the most amount of value, right? Remaining a profitable company so we can build more stuff. And that truly influences on how the products are designed themselves, right? It's like finding quality components, finding quality everything. The plastic is not just plastic; it's like polycarbonate that's like clear. It costs more, but it has to be that way, right? So yeah, so like that's sort of like the give and take in the whole process, right? Like, hardware is much more than just sort of like putting together some software into a chip. It's like, how do you design everything, and everything fits, and everything is a function of each other in both complexity and cost, and that's the fun, at least to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, actually, one thing that I do want to take a moment to do is to define the terms we're using. So can you maybe take us through what an OpenDime is and how that is different from a hardware wallet, and then kind of what a hardware wallet is and why it's important?
Sure.
In any order you want.
Yeah. So OpenDime is essentially a physical Bitcoin, right? Traditionally, back in the day, the only way to give somebody Bitcoin without them having a wallet was to print a paper wallet. The problem with that is, if I give you a paper wallet, I can take the money back because I know the private key. So we spent years trying to figure out what can we do from like Meta or whatever. And then what OpenDime became is this thing where neither party knows the private key. provably. So then when you give it to somebody else, you know that they cannot do a chargeback, right? They cannot spend you. So you unseal it, and then you can spend the coins that are in it, or you pass it along to the next person and the nth person, right? So that's what OpenDime is. It's like physical Bitcoin. It's a bearer instrument,
which is really novel. I mean,
it
that's
is.
and yeah, I mean, when you say unseal it, it's literally you have to like stab a hole through the board in order to unlock it. And
that was more because of personality. We could have done with software, but it wouldn't be as satisfying. And the very original one, you actually had to break a piece of the PCB.
I don't know. I kind of love that though, because it makes the entire process physical. So like you can literally look at an OpenDime and be like, is there a hole through this part of the device? You know? Right. And obviously you want to verify the address and everything that separately, plugging it into something. But I think I don't know, it's a cool idea.
Yeah, that's what SatsCard product that's coming out is essentially the evolution of OpenDime. OpenDime's still going to exist, but it's like cheaper, and it's going to be NFC, and it has 10 slots, so you can have 10 keys in it, and you can have art and all that good stuff, right? So that's the fun on that sort of category of products we make, the bearer instruments, physical Bitcoin. And
so this is the Sats card, correct?
Yes.
So on the Sats card, is it basically there's 10 slots, and then once you like you deposit funds into those addresses, and then you have to like unseal them. And once you've unsealed one of those 10 slots, it's like done, and you only got 9 left.
Yeah, and it will tell you that's been unsealed, and you will rotate to the next one, so they can reuse it 10 times because there was room in the chip. So we're exposing that to the users.
Oh, interesting. Okay, it's not limited to 10; it just rotates through.
Well, I mean, you can use the 10 at the same time, but yes, the idea is that you can use more than once, right? So there's a bit less e-waste.
Got it. I mean, as you mentioned, you made a reference to it. I think the only thing that I would have against something like that is that it would be much harder to shove something like a credit card form factor into one's rectum in order to like safely transport it across a border, which, as I understand it, is why the OpenDime has those rounded edges.
I mean, that was really made for Jensef. He was very unhappy with the square corners.
I'm sure he tested it out many times before giving you that product feedback.
I did not ask for products back. So then the card is like that, and we're gonna have some fun cards that are sort of like covert as well. One of them looks like a hotel key, and if you go to the address, it's like a hotel website.
Oh, that's so cool.
We're gonna have a lot of fun with that stuff.
Oh, I fucking love that.
Yeah.
Got it.
So then, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so feel free to continue on the thread that you were on, or I was going to say, can you describe for the audience, like what a hardware wallet is and why it's important when we're talking about Bitcoin?
Yeah. So hardware wallets are essentially a means for you to store a key, sign a transaction outside of a computer. So back in the day, everybody used to get robbed all the time, right? Get computer hacked or accidental or whatever. And then hardware wallets came about. And then a lot of those issues started to fade because you were essentially separating the signing and the key and the key storage from the computer, right? Because computers are this extremely general purpose devices that have a football field worth of attack surface, right? Computers were not designed to hold secrets. So say, for example, you copy a piece of text on your screen. Every program on your computer can see that clipboard, right? So it's an absolute disaster of complexity, right? There's millions and millions and millions and millions of lines of code running and like, hundreds or thousands of processes running at the same time. It's very difficult. And even if you do make your computer secured, there's still like a ton of stuff, even if the most open source computer, that you absolutely cannot open. Okay, like it is a total pipe dream to think you can make a computer secure. Now, if you're an extremely advanced user, you have a chance, right? You can do some stuff to keep it that way. But realistically speaking, for most people, including people who are advanced, you rather just offload all that to a device that purposely built, very narrow build for Bitcoin, right? So, and hardware wallets are actually a misnomer. They should have been called signing devices, which I made a little website for, signingdevices.com. Explains why. So a wallet is a piece of software that has blockchain data information. It has the ledger, right? So Bitcoin Core, Electrum, whatever. So they go and they pick your transaction, your UTXOs, right? And then they build a transaction. Now, if they have a private key in them, they can sign it. If they don't, then they send it to the hardware wallet. So Coldcard made PSBTs, partially signed Bitcoin transaction standard, like widely used now. And it's essentially a file that you take into the hardware wallet, which is not connected to the internet, is not connected to anything, right? And the hardware wallet, the signing device, all it does is like tells you on the screen, hey, do you really want to send this amount of Bitcoin to this address? And then you say yes or no. And then what it does is it creates a signature over that transaction, right? And then you can take it back to the computer and send it out to the network to broadcast the transaction. So it really is like just a device to not shit where you eat.
It's a great way to say that. I'm totally stealing that. Your slogan should be "Don't shit where you eat."
Mm-hmm.
Use a signing device. Yeah, I mean, I think so. We talked about attack surface, and you mentioned that it's, you know, trying to air gap one's computer is basically, it's not going to happen, right? It's just not feasible. I also just want to acknowledge, like, you have so many domains that just redirect to random places. What is the one that's like, don't try to air gap your computer?
No, I think it's air gap computer or computers.com, I think. I lose track of the domains.
I love the CSS on that one. Yeah, so I mean, so you've got this purpose-built device, a signing device that does one thing and does one thing very well. As you said, it basically lets you verify that you actually want to make a transaction, and then when you hit a button, it generates the signed PSBT, which then can be rebroadcast to the network by an external thing.
That's right.
And talk to me about the design decisions that went into, you know, what has changed over the years when we go from, because there's been 4 versions of the Coldcard so far, and what's changed over the years? What upgrades have been made? Why were those important? Yeah, and why is the newest one kind of more secure than previous ones?
Yeah, so version 1 wasn't going to even have a case. We just made it because I was not happy with the hardware wallets that were in the market, and we wanted one for ourselves. That was just that simple. And touch buttons on that one were kind of problematic for most people in Europe. Somehow it was not doing well. So then, and he was using the first gen of that secure element, and then version 2 had a better secure element, and clicky buttons, and a few other sort of improvements. You know, just general sort of, that's why we call it MK, right? So Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 is just like incremental improvements. And then Mark 3 is it was a very big upgrade, again, newer secure element, that had some fixes, which was kind of cool. And we started supporting a lot more features as well, right? So we speed up things, a lot more security, improvements on the duress pin. What else? There was just a lot more sort of improvements, generally speaking. And then Mark 4 was a huge upgrade. So Mark 4 has a family up on the main processor. So it's like, it's night and day. We joke that's infinite memory now, because essentially now we can sign any transaction size. The bottleneck would be the Bitcoin network, not Coldcard. So if you're a miner trying to sign a bunch of small inputs, we can sign it. it has 2 secure elements. So Mark
Why-
3
why-
is so Mark 3 is undefeated, right? Nobody ever. So Mark 2 Ledger managed to spend enough money to get in, right? And it's not reproducible that easy. Anyways, it's very complicated. You need a $1 million lab, and you might screw up the sample. Mark 3, nobody has to this date managed to provide us with proof that they can extract the seed, and that's like with some heavy resources behind. And then Mark 4, we're like, hey, how can we make this extra stupid? So we went with 2 secure elements and this new processor. So it's really cool. And the way we design Coldcard is that we don't trust any of the chips. They don't trust each other, right? So even if you found one chip, you cannot get the secret out because the secret is going to be encrypted with a secret that's on the other chip. So now you need one of each. You need 3 of them.
Wait, sorry. Walk me through that. How does that work?
Yes. So because secure elements are kind of like black boxes in a way, we don't trust them, right? Even though the ones we use, we try to find the dumbest, most secure chip that we could find. So there is no real software in them. It's called fixed function silicon. It means that the chip just does the functions that are on the silicon. They don't have firmware. They don't have any of that stuff. So it's a lot better to audit and all those things. And a lot less room for backdoors and things. So we don't trust any of them. So we make them have to use a different chip for a shared secret.
Oh, interesting. Got it.
So that if the device is off, nobody can go, with their known backdoor. Say you're like, the NSA, right? You go to the chip and you say, hey, I want to use the backdoor that we put on you, on your design. And
now they have to have backdoors for
okay.
both chips, yeah.
Yeah. No, but now it's 3.
So
and they're from different vendors.
I love it. So one thing, I mean, we spoke a lot on Clubhouse previously, and one of the points that you made is that even with all these significant security upgrades, one should approach it or think about it as if someone had enough money and they had, a super high-end lab that they could eventually get into one of these devices. Is that still the kind of way that you would articulate it?
Well, I mean, I think we arrived at a point now with Coldcard's design that, given infinite resources, infinite times, and infinite samples, anything is possible, right? But what we do is we raise the cost of attack, we raise the time of attack, and we raise the failure of attack, right? Because they only really have one go at each chip because they can break the sample.
Yep.
Very easily, right? So now, because you have 3 is exponential failure rate. So it's, it really becomes a problem.
So let's go into, even with this, a super secure hardware device, one can still lose one's Bitcoin, of course. So what are the most common ways that people tend to, fuck this up and basically lose access to their Bitcoin?
I think the main thing is, as I like to say, is most people will screw themselves out of their coins before somebody takes them from them. So, for example, people will have complex backups, right? They're gonna, put the backup in a QR, or they're gonna print it, or they're gonna make some convoluted, self-invented encryption, whatever they're gonna do.
Okay, do not roll your own crypto, Jesus.
No. So what you should do is you get a metal plate. We make a cheap one, or go buy it from somebody else, and you put your 12 to 24 words there, okay? And you're already ahead of 99% of the people, because house fires do happen. Is this 100% proof of house fire proof? No, right? It's still a piece of metal that could heat enough and something else could destroy it. But if you put it in your backyard or your basement or whatever, right? Like you've already increased your chances of survivability much more, right? Another thing that you could do is have a passphrase. Make
Oh no, did we lose you?
sure and saying, hey, we need
Oh,
you to
I think we
Did I
lost you for a second.
off?
Is there any way you can
Oh.
get to like higher bandwidth internet, or is this?
No, I'm remote on internet, satellite internet.
All right, sounds good. Keep going though.
Yeah, no. So if it starts getting choppy, let me know. Turn off video. That helps.
Okay. And your audio is still good, so even with that, we'll keep going. We'll keep going.
All right.
So Q.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or go ahead, NBK.
Yeah, no. So that's it. Like make sure you back up in metal. If you are concerned about single metal, we did invent a new setup called Seed XOR, so that you can split the seed safely, not rolling your own crypto, not splitting the seed literally in half. So
And the idea there is that the XOR operation is basically standard, so you can just
oh
reverse
yeah,
it.
I mean it's standard computer program, and you can do it by hand with a PDF. So even if you have a solar flare event that wipes half the Earth, and you are on the unfortunate half, you can still recover with using a PDF pen and paper. So
Okay, time out. We're gonna stop on this topic because I'm so sick of this fun. Can we list between the three of us like at least 10 different things that, quite frankly, like if something were to happen and all of the internet were to shut down, like there are 10 other very vital things that we could very quickly and easily assess that would also be in just as much trouble as Bitcoin. And I'll even go so far as to say, like, all of your finances are fucked. I don't give a shit if you're a Bitcoin maxi or a fiat maxi or fucking Peter Schiff and all your gold. Like, you're not going to do anything if the internet's down with all that money. So I just wanted to just chime in and say that 2 cents.
yeah, so the solar flare event, I mean, one is like for a solar flare to be that strong, the amount of problems you're gonna have are ginormous. So all their planes are gonna fall. All probably the power grid will stop because the distribution is electronic, and some might still get a little bit because maybe the box was properly, but you'd have to be so immense amount of power. Let's just assume all the fail safes fail. So water stops, power stops, car stops, pacemaker stop, internet stops, everything that you know in your life that is like post caveman stops. Like you can't even run a farm anymore because the tractor will stop unless you have an old tractor.
Yeah, it's the least of your concerns.
Yeah, your toilet won't flush because it's gonna back up because the sewers probably have pump as well.
You're like, no, you're watering the
Everything,
faucet.
like no, but
watering
here's the thing.
faucet.
Bitcoin survives because the other half of the planet will have a copy of the blockchain. So now you just take a flight from the other side to come pick you up. You take your seat to the other side and you make a
But
transaction.
flights don't work. Flights don't work. So how are we getting there, MVK?
No,
Let's
it does.
map this
It does.
out.
The other half of the planet will still survive. So it's only half the planet that gets
So
exposed.
I've got to wait for some flights from the other side of the planet to come over
come pick you up.
here.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
If your amateur radio gear is going to still work because it was powered off while
Dude,
that was
I
happening.
actually have like survival radio equipment that I take when I go backcountry snowboarding. So this is good. Good to know. Good to know
That's
that
fair.
should be on the definitely take everywhere I go in the world going forward bag.
Anyway,
So this is actually
that was
something
a big
like
segue.
yeah, no. As a brief diversion, like talking about, obviously, NVK, you have broadcast a Bitcoin transaction over ham radio, which is fucking awesome. What is the current state of using like mesh networks to broadcast Bitcoin transactions? I know
It's
there's
very
the
similar to renewable energy.
totally fucked.
It's a toy. So no, see, this is the thing, right? Amateur radio, whenever shit happens, is the first thing that comes back online. The hams have nothing else to do but to go help people with their gear. It's how half of them justify its existence. Um, so it really is there. It's just it's low bandwidth and it's cumbersome, right? But it's like full recoverable. It's amazing. It really is. And there's like 50 different modes and all kinds of stuff. Um, I can reach Japan from over here, and I'm very far away from there. Um, so all the stuff is doable. Is just how much pain because it's low bandwidth and cumbersome. That's all.
Got it. I want to hear your thoughts shifting completely direction. We were talking about inflation before you jumped in. We're talking about the CPI print today. As a Canuck, what is the experience that you're having around the prices of goods going up? How is that affecting you? How is that
things
affecting your
here
business?
are, you can think of Canada as essentially 30% worse than the US, generally speaking, about anything economic.
Got it.
So just think about our dollar parity spread, right? The difference that we have, that's normally our compounding issue, generally speaking. We are a strong exporter of energy and resources, right? So even if the country is completely idiotic about not exporting the oil in the proper volumes that it needs to, we still export a lot of crap. So Canadian dollar is still fairly strong. That's why it can be a tiny, was it like 100th of the American economy, 1,000th of the American economy, and still have a currency that's fairly strong. But and you have strong rule of law and things like, except from Trudeau wants to put truckers in jail. But aside from that, it's still a solid country, right? With solid people and solid resources. So it survives. It will always survive. But food is more expensive. It's a cold country, so you have other issues as well that come with that. Yeah.
Q,
I was surprised. Yeah. Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Keep going, MVK.
The CPI announcement was kind of it's already, I don't know, they just didn't think further. Like who cares, right? Just go and say, oh, it's 6 or 5. Who cares?
That is exactly what I was saying before you jumped on.
Like the dollar is already a construct, right? Like it's very postmodernist. So might as well have the CPI be postmodernist as well, right? Just say the number, meme it into existence, just keep on saying the CPI is 5 or 4 until it becomes 5 or 4. That's it.
I mean, there has to be a degree. There's a degree of, like, I do agree with you. Like, they could just very well have just said, like, CPI is 5, everyone shut the fuck up. But the truth is, even 9.1 reading is complete and utter bullshit here in America. Because that's not, like, when I go fill up gas this morning, it was not 9% inflation from when I filled up last year, on July 13th. So,
but they call that as external. It's because of external effects or whatever.
Yeah, it's
right?
all
Like,
Putin's fault. Right?
They've blamed everything but themselves because, and as I said at the very beginning of the episode, you have people grading themselves and being asked to then share with the rest of the world, hey, how was the work that you did that you self-report on? Like, what is the incentive for them to turn around and say we messed up or even we got it right? There's no incentive either way. So if we want to use P's logic to like really understand why they do what they do, it's because there's a degree of accountability that does exist through, whether or not you like them or not, mainstream media asking these things, because the truth is people are upset over it. So they're creating a lot of narratives and dialogues and clickbaity titles that say, oh, the price of gas is this, save money on your grocery trip by doing this or that. So that the information or the idea that inflation is here is in the zeitgeist. And it would be such a disconnect from reality, which, mind you, there's already this disconnect from reality from what these people in DC tell Americans and the rest of the world of what's going on. There is that disconnect, but it would be such a stark, almost in the vein of the comment of let them eat cake from the French Revolution, of It's not my problem. So like, I don't care. Like, give them whatever. Like, no, that's for better or worse. Technology has connected us in this way that if we want to hold these people accountable, we can. But for whatever reason, we just don't.
Yeah, I think it's an illusion. You can't keep them accountable. It always Nancy Pelosi is like $500 million now net worth. I mean, there is no accountability for the modern, soft socialism state that exists now, right? Is a total and full on kleptocracy. And at least like in Canada, media is fully subsidized by the government, and you also have the state broadcaster. So there is only one narrative, and unfortunately, so so the majority of the population don't live like in the city centers, right? It's almost just slightly less than a half. I think the U.S. distribution is similar. Um, and people outside major city centers have a normal life and don't give a fuck about any of the shit that's going on in the world. All this stuff that like we all argue on Twitter, or like these things are completely like irrelevant to most people living their lives. And I think it just happens that a lot of us is just a little like hyper connected in a way, sort of like hyper aware of all the issues. And that creates sort of like this cycles of like doom and gloom, which also sell a lot when it comes to media, right? There is always bad shit happening in the world, and there is always good shit happening in the world. When the markets are going down, they only focus on the bad shit, and when the markets are going up, they don't really mention the good shit either. They just don't focus on the bad shit as much. So like it's this weird thing where it's like there is very little good news, generally speaking, about anything, because nobody really cares about good news. It's a weird
Good news doesn't
thing.
sell. It's
But
the
I
inflammatory.
think it's deeper than that. It's like just maybe just humans interested in things that are not like sounding the alarm on something, right? We just sort of like take it for granted. But I think just like social media, the way that we live now, is sort of like just compounds this natural ways that we are. And
So does Bitcoin fix this, or
yes,
okay, good. That was a test. You
it
passed.
fixes
Good
everything.
job.
So
Good job.
I want to MVK invite you down to my mother's basement with me and put on your tinfoil hat. And I want to share a theory that I have never been disproven on this. I came up with this in 2014. So in the 8 years that I've come up with this conclusion, I have yet to hear a counter that, suffice to say, made me change my mind. We in America live in a very religious country. We like to think we have separation of church and state. We do not. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Christianity is the number one religion in the world, or Catholicism. I always mix up the two. Not really religious. My bad. Either way, there are 4 signs of the end of the world, as was taught to me by an ex-girlfriend from years and years ago. The first being some sort of natural disaster. Why do you think you hear about a different hurricane every year? Why do you think you hear about the tsunamis? That's the first of these 4 things, natural disaster. The second being some sort of crazy disease. As far back as I can remember, like COVID has been COVID, but dude,
Is this your 4 horsemen bullshit?
The new 4 horsemen bullshit. But
Yeah, I mean, you're
same
really
thing.
going back to Egypt there.
But bear with me now. Dude, when I was a kid, like mad cow disease was a thing. I remember not eating a burger for a while because they were like, oh, mad cow disease. Like, I think I was like 6. I don't really remember much. I just remember it was a thing.
Creutzfeldt Jacob will fuck you up.
Swine flu was a thing when I was in high school. Like, these weird diseases have always been around, and they
Yes.
always are picked up by the media. So again, a little bit weird, a little bit fishy. So that's number 2. Number 3, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is man fighting another man. So like that's why like you always hear war coverage.
That happens literally every day, everywhere.
Like that's the point. The point I'm trying to make is all of this stuff is happening all the time, but we get it reported to us every single day as though it's like, this is it. This is the one. This is the end of the world. And they keep us interested in all of this information because they give us like the most doomsday scenarios, and these religious fanatics and the people who are programmed into buying into this whole the end of the world, this is sort of going to be the final markers of it, start to pick up on these clues, whether subconsciously or intentionally, and then they get tied into finding and getting updated more on the latest disease outbreak or the latest natural disaster.
Here is an alternative view of this for you. So religious people actually were the people who fought against the most on say COVID, on how COVID was handled. Religious people looked to each other to how they handle things. It's almost like everyone has their cult, and the stronger the religion, the harder the cult bubble, right? So they actually are less impervious to outside influence of news, in my opinion.
That's interesting.
So, you know, when you see how all this shit is like really sort of like becomes crazy, it really is like the more atheistic sort of a city dweller that sort of buys in more into the doom and gloom that it is the people, like I was saying, like for example in the countryside, who don't give a fuck about what's going on in the world. So you know, part of the reason, in my view, on why sort of like the whole COVID response was this absolute insanity is because, you know, the population asked the politicians to handle it. People were screaming at politicians, telling them to close borders, to do this, to do that, to do masks, to do, you know, it was the people. And because you have things like Twitter and Facebook, you can actually reach the politicians publicly and shame them directly in a big way. So they respond. I feel like the same is true for, say, for example, money printing and inflation, generally speaking. You know, it's the population who wants the free shit. The aristocratic sort of like ultra wealthy class doesn't give a fuck either way. They're gonna be fine. So in their view, is like, sure, give the plebes what they want. It's gonna make my assets go up too, but it wouldn't make much of a difference to begin with. So if they want, you know, free credit to go buy 10 houses even though they can't afford it, sure, give it to them. It's gonna keep them from killing me. So, you know, the people have a lot more power than they think that they do, and they do exercise the power. It's just they just happen to exercise this power in a terrible direction because of sort of like this compounding terrible incentives, and Bitcoin fixes that.
I was gonna say, bring it all the way back. Bitcoin is a religion. Bitcoin is a cult. I thought that's the direction you were going.
I have no issues with being a part of a cult. Call Bitcoin a cult. Hey, great. We're part of a cult now. Wonderful.
No, we follow logic and reason and none of that. Okay.
What is the most absurd thing Bitcoiners do that even by your standards, you're like, all right, this is a bit too far, guys?
I don't know, man. To each their own.
I love that. That's the best answer.
I think that's true. We may have temporarily lost MDK, but for me, it's definitely sunning one's balls. That's like a thing that the Bitcoin community seems is like super important. I guess it's really like sunlight, but man, there's a huge contingent. It's wild. MVK, your video or your audio is choppy. Oh, maybe it's back
I missed
now.
where you guys were.
Oh,
no, we said to each their own comment was beautifully put, but I don't like beautiful. I like clickbaity shit. So I'm gonna keep poking at this.
Are you gonna dye your hair blonde?
Oh, it's like you read my mind, bro.
Damn. Yeah. What the fuck was that?
How you feel about? I don't want to directly antagonize him, but like, fine, on the narrative and the idea of to each their own. How do you feel about people who spend time and money both in this space as well as other crypto ventures?
I have this huge sort of like a fight within myself about, like, I am a pro freedom person, right? Like, I want people to be free to do whatever they want, if it is to scam or to create scams, whatever, right? And the market should settle those things. It's hard to reconciliate that on a daily life, right? Like, it's like, what do you call out? What do you don't call out? Why don't you just ignore it? It's none of my fucking problem, right? I don't have a resolution, but that's sort of like the the constant the constant like inner battle of like, you know, what do you engage with, what you don't engage with. You know, in a way, it's like I rather the Ethereum guys get away with their bullshit security and then have the state deal with them. But I'm not going to deny that there's going to be a lot of Schadenfreude of seeing them like going to jail too. Like,
yeah, you're going to be drinking
you
those
know,
tears.
I am human, right? Like it's like, but like, you know, I prefer no regulation, and I prefer, you know, like sort of like these things being handled by the market, including with people calling each other out, right? Like one way in which the market resolves that is people screaming about how the other guy is a scammer, to advise his neighbors, right, that he shouldn't do business with him. You know, like Vitalik was very crafty on how he always sort of like created his narratives around Bitcoiners. Like the Maxi thing was his invention, because he started his Ponzi, and we're all calling it out. So yeah, it's tricky. We're gonna see a lot of people quit Bitcoin all the time. That's just how it goes. It's just the money is just too sweet in the scamfi.
But like, what is money, bro? Like, if you're chasing money and you're going to avenues that give you more fiat or more shit coins, like, to me, that's just a sign that you don't actually know what money really is. But that's just because I'm an arrogant piece of shit who read Safedean's book one time years ago.
I mean, it's nice to have money. You know, like there is only so much stoicism people are willing to have or do. You know, like I think like flaunting and sort of like buying Lambos, but like, you know, having nice things is a nice thing.
Yeah, I do think that there is a tendency to like moralize business decisions in the Bitcoin community that I think is misplaced. I think, you know, for me personally, and everybody has their own metric, it's about like, you know, not causing harm to other people. I think when people start promoting things that are scams that other people are going to get like totally fucked over, that's really bad. But there is this weird disconnect. Like in the Bitcoin community, it's like, you know, and I do it as much as anyone, like screaming at people who, you know, don't follow the sort of Bitcoin only maxi ethos. Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's like, oh, like somebody owns stocks. That's cool. You know, like somebody's like trading, like playing the market. Like everybody's like, hey, yeah, that's cool. Do your thing. So there are there's a lot of contradictions in the Bitcoin community that get really old after a while. But
well, the thing is, there is no community, right? Like it's like there is no dollar community.
Yes.
Right? There is no gold community.
No.
It's just,
Wait.
There is like
I
self-interest.
And Davos proved that there is a dollar community.
Fuck Davos.
I mean, it would have really been Jekyll Island, right? Like it was just a hunting trip. You know, if you ever have a chance, read
that's a great reference.
The what is it?
Most Dangerous Game.
No, the Creature of Jekyll Island. Fantastic book.
The Creature from Jekyll Island. That is an amazing book. It's a fucking tomb, but everyone should read it.
I'm not saying I disagree with you, P. I want to poke a hole in something that you said, or at least the way you presented it. Because to me, if you ignoring everything you said after when people start losing money and getting scammed, a lot of the presentation of that sounded to me no different than the way ESG is fed to the masses. This is for the benefit. This is for the best interest of society, for the environment, for whatever subset, whatever group, based on the judgment of other people.
I mean, you know, humans need trust, right? It's an inherent human condition, and it's essentially social efficiency, right? Like you cannot function as a person in society or in a family without trust, right? You have different trust levels, different trust circles, but without it, like you don't go sleep at night with your eyes open in case your wife stabs you because she was mad at you earlier today because you
Speak for
didn't change
yourself.
a diaper or something, right? Like, so you have trust, right? Like you need trust, you need credit, there's many things you need, right? To sort of to create stuff and to live your life. But like the issue is when sort of like you have essentially this scam artists, right? Like for example, the CEO of Celsius. I mean, like you look at like how like they were selling their stuff. The guy
Yeah.
literally describes a Ponzi. He's
Mhm.
like, and there's that interview with like Safe and I think somebody else and Tone. The guy's like, we can pay amazing yields. Look, we take deposits from person A and we give it to person B.
Oh God, I know.
And I'm like, that's a literal Ponzi.
It's so fucking bad. I could talk about the
But the problem is like you can't save everybody, right? Like and people were screaming about Celsius forever. Some people are looking for easy money, either because of greed or because they're just unfortunately uneducated. And like hopefully people learned the lesson, but like people clearly didn't, because I think people were still depositing into Celsius to try to.
So
save themselves.
I went into one of the like those rooms that are like, Celsius Cope rooms, and I actually was like, I came in like, all right, I'm gonna take some stuff, I'm gonna send out some like fiery tweets about how like, and I ended up just being like, this is so
It's
sad.
sad.
I just left. I was like, Jesus, like these are like real
depressing.
people. Like it's so depressing. But here's what I want to do though. Let's shift away from that because it's too fucking sad and depressing. I want to talk more about, I want to choose violence. NBK, what are some things that have happened recently that have gotten you very like irritated or actually excited? It can be positive too. What's got you excited or furious in the Bitcoin space right now that we haven't yet talked about? Whether technological, new.
Oh, I mean, bear markets, like normally bear markets are a lot of fun. Traditionally, like you have a sacrifice, you have
the blood moon rises.
you have like people sort of more focused on building, and this bear market has been super cringe. It's super cringe, and sort of that's kind of like annoying, and so so we chose violence. We were like, fuck all this shit, we're just gonna go build. So we're building a bunch of stuff, and trying to sort of like focus on that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just like there's a lot of like bad faith players that came into the space as well. Like cold moochers and other things like that. That's sort of like it's a bit of it's like.
But to your point, it's a tale as old as time. It happens every cycle. It happens even outside of Bitcoin. It's just a constant.
Oh, that's the cycle, right? And reality is, right, like Bitcoin was a cozy thing. The last bear market is a cozy, tight, neat, like smaller space. You have like this different sort of like types of Bitcoiners that do their thing. But this last cycle became very mainstream, right? So you're gonna start having a lot of normies coming in, and
Matt Damon did that whole commercial, the Super Bowl ad.
There you go.
He educated people in that commercial,
and I think that's just the path. I mean, like Bitcoin is gonna grow much more, and all this nerdiness around the money, our maxi or orthodoxy, and all these things are gonna get much more watered down, and because that's how things grow, right? They water down. The internet was the same. BBSs were awesome. There was a certain way of being on the internet, and the internet became like people sharing pictures of their meals on on Facebook, right? Like that's far from like gifts on BBSs, right? Like so yeah, I mean, it's just, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either, right? I mean, it's just more people using the thing that is meant to be used, right? Like there is no stake on the Bitcoin like protocol, right? There's nothing there that says what kind of meal you have to have, or religion you have to have, or anything, right?
but if you read between the lines of the code, you can see clearly.
Exactly.
Only eat meat, sun your testicles.
I mean, eventually everybody arrives at that if they go the Bitcoin route. I mean,
I'm not
kidding.
yet that enlightened, unfortunately. I will say there was a Spaces, like, I don't know, fucking feels like years ago now, where I was messaging you like, bro, you got to get in here. We're talking cool shit. And you were like, I'm so sorry, I'm busy. And you sent me a picture of like your crossbow, and you were like, I'm hunting moose. And I was like, damn, that is a flex. I was very impressed. my parents would never let me have a crossbow, but they would let me shoot guns. They were like, crossbows are too powerful. I was like, what the fuck? But so I want to hear more. Like, what are you excited about in the Bitcoin space? What new developments? What protocol improvements or projects or companies that are out there do you think are actually interesting?
Yeah, so there's too much fucking going on in Bitcoin right now. That's why we even started that pod plan.
Oh no, we're losing you.
Review podcast, because like I just needed a place to sort of like put together a list and go over what's new.
NVK, can you try turning off your camera?
Okay, hang on.
Turn off your video.
There you go. Is it better?
Even your image is pixelated, but that is better. Keep going.
All right.
So you were saying you started the podcast.
Yes, so that I could keep track of projects. And this week, like the list is monumentally huge. So there is the Fed Mint, which is like a Chaumium server thing, so that you can have like, it's different. It's a different type of trust network.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that. Well, so take us through some of those things. So
I can't yet. I can't.
All right.
I need to read more.
All right.
But it's essentially just imagine like a little network that has a central entity that controls the system, but all the transactions are private. Kind of like a side chain. Let's put it this way. It's not really, but what else? Oh God, I can actually open the list here.
Yeah, do it. I want to hear from you. Like,
hang on. Let's see here. Episode 2.
Q, what's got you super excited in the Bitcoin space?
There you go. Got it. Sorry guys, did I cut off there again?
No, you're good. Keep going.
All right. So there's the new BTC server version. Electrum private server version. Hugo from Nunchuck released a video now using TapSigner. TapSigner is our new hardware wallet. It's like a blind signer NFC card. So you just tap and you sign a transaction in the card. So that's really cool. Zoos have a new release. Blockstream is releasing aggregated signatures that are non-interactive, which is kind of nice. So that means you're going to be able to do a kind of aggregated signature that you don't need to have the devices all online at the same time, essentially, so that you have multiple signatures between them.
Wait, what are the implications of that?
Well, so far, all the solutions that were around required everybody to be online. Like, imagine kind of like a multi-sig, for example, right? Imagine if everybody had to be connected at the same time to do the multi-sig in a group. That's both a security issue, right? Physical security, because now everybody is essentially exposed. When everybody's going to have to be signing. And then it creates like technical issues, right? Because you have to have the connection between all of the devices together at the same time. So this solution essentially removes the need to be interactive. So like it's just like each party does their thing once. I don't know if it's in order yet. I haven't read the paper, but essentially streamlines that. And aggregated signatures, these are semi-aggregated signatures. They help with privacy because you can put a bunch of signatures together, so it looks like one. Also have not read enough there to know what extent they go in that direction, because it's semi-aggregated. I want to know which part is semi.
Those are the details.
Yeah, so like but these are all sort of like very cool new things. Apparently, silent payments, which I have not read much about it, is also out. What's his name? OGBTC. He released Marshall. He released a little board for you to overclock your.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about that.
Oh my God! I mean, dude, the list is insane here.
So here's one thing that we talked about. We've talked about in the past around Schnorr and Taproot. the recent upgrade to the Bitcoin protocol. So we had talked about the idea of threshold signatures. So
Yes.
multi-sig being the idea that basically with multi-sig, which we're going to talk about a little bit with Craig Raw, you have like 2 of 3 signing devices that have to basically sign a transaction in order for it to be valid and mine into a block, right? But with threshold signatures, the analogy that you always used was like you can have less secure devices that basically contribute, let's say, less to the actual transaction. It's a terrible analogy, but where are we on threshold signatures?
Okay, so think about it this way: a standard Bitcoin signature is essentially like a signature in which you're compounding each signature. But think about it this way: you have a piece of cord, and you make 3 knots on it. So those are the 3 signatures, and then you toss it to the network, and everybody in the network can see the 3 signatures on it. Right? Everybody knows what's going on. With threshold signatures, it's more like a pie. So from the outside, looks just like a pie, a covered pie. Okay.
I
But
imagine you just stopping
inside-
there and being like, it's
Yeah.
a pie, end of story.
Yeah, but then inside of the pie, you define the threshold. Is it just a quarter of the pie? Is it a fifth of the pie? And each part of the little bits of pie inside can be defined by you as well. So how much a pie piece is sized. So
the
you
idea is
have
that
so you have essentially like a lot more definition of like the size, the weight of each piece, right? And how much of the total do you need? And from the outside, because it's a linear signature now, from the outside it looks like a single signature. So you don't know that there were 10 signers or 1 signer.
So the idea is that you could have, as I understood it, you could have less secure devices. Like you could use a phone as a contributor to threshold signature scheme, and you would just give it a smaller slice of that pie. Is that?
That's right. Yeah,
So
that's
instead of
right.
having to-
Because if somebody gets the little piece, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and there's like if the pie has to add up to 100%, then you'd have. Is it accurate to say that you'd have multiple devices that, in sum, would be more than that 100%, but essentially you
Sure.
only need 100%?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It wouldn't matter, right? Like, but why 100%? Why don't you just make it 50% of the pie? It's all you need for making a signature, right? So it's for making a valid transaction. So then you can have a phone that's just like a third, and then you can have another device that's 2/3. Say you have a Coldcard doing 2/3 and a phone that does 1/3.
So where are we with that? When
There
threshold
is-
signature?
There is no, that's called MuSig instead of multi-sig. And MuSig, I don't think there is a spec yet. Let's put it this way, a formal spec yet. It's very complicated cryptography.
And sorry to put you on the spot, but what is the difference between MuSig and Frost?
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
I can't remember what Frost is. Not
Fair
at the top of my head.
Got it. All right, where should we go from here? What else are you have you been thinking a lot about in the Bitcoin space? What's come up across your desk that has caught your fancy?
I like simple things. So I think that the Nunchuck wallet that Hugo is making is a big deal because he allows for, if you're old enough in the space, you would remember a wallet called Copay that then got bought by BitPay and then it was destroyed. It's essentially collaborative multi-sig that does not have a centralized entity, right? I mean, you might still use Nunchuck server as just a way of doing the message routing between them, but it's encryption it's E2E encrypted and so end-to-end encrypted, and I think eventually you'll probably be able to run your own server kind of thing between the parties, right? But having multi-party multi-sig that's like very easy with like just a tapping NFC card is super powerful, especially for small businesses and sort of like decentralized entities, right? Like say for my company, we don't have an office, right? Bitcoin Magazine doesn't have an office, if I remember right, either, right? I mean, you guys have a
No, we
location,
do
but
know.
nobody's there, right?
No, the team is huge.
NVK, let's keep pushing this narrative though, because there keeps being this godforsaken reason to force people to show up to the physical office that we have, and I am not a fan of this in any way, shape, or form.
Right. What else?
Wait. Can you define?
Sure.
You just used a term that I want to make sure
Collaborative
everybody was.
multisig?
Yes, yeah. Can you talk about collaborative multisig, what that means, and how that is different from traditional multisig?
Yeah. So like technically speaking, it's the same, but in practice, the difference is that different people have different keys. So in normal multi-sig, just for yourself, you are the one who have all the keys, right? So you have a key at home, you have a key in a different country, and you have a key, I don't know, like under the ocean somewhere, right? And then if somebody tries to attack you at home, you don't have all the keys, there's nothing you can do, right? But that's just you. Collaborative multi-sig just means multi-party multi-sig, right? So it means that, I have a key, Q have a key, P have a key. If we want to send a transaction, I send you guys a message encrypted in this app saying, hey, I want to send, $10 to this dude who has a funny meme, right? And then one of you have to approve it. I mean, saying that is a 2 out of 3 kind of wallet, right? But like making that smooth is not easy, right? And then there's also like the type that is like Casa or Unchained do, where they're essentially just one of the keys, but you're still capable of transacting without them. It's just different variations of who has control of keys. It's a very, very needed thing in business. Like you have to have an operational wallet that you have more than one person sign, and it's super useful.
Makes sense.
Yeah. What other projects are like super cool right now?
NBK, I got a different question for you. If you'll entertain me. So you two are far, far more technically inclined and advanced than myself. And the truth is, as we continue to onboard more and more people, we're more likely to get more people who are like me and less people like you and P. I'm a big believer in the 80-20 principle that of 100% of users, 80% will not really understand or know what they're doing, while 20% will understand the nuances. I am deathly afraid of opening my Coldcard. Not really, but like it's been set aside for a period where I have 6 hours that no one is going to bother me, so I can actually like really do this properly. At what point are these trade-offs something that we're going to have to really assess to further onboard the masses? And I'm not saying this in a way to say like, Coldcard sucks. Coldcard is, in my opinion, the best option out there for cold storage, but I also worry that it can.
No, I totally get it.
So
yeah, no, it's a very fair representation. So in my view, as we move from a few 100 million people using Bitcoin to a few billion people using Bitcoin, first is you can't save the majority, right? Bitcoin is not for everyone. Bitcoin is available to everyone. It's a very different, very, very different thing. The majority of people will have Bitcoin in centralized entities, right? Because it will be easier, it will be cheaper, and it will come with insurance, and you will have other sets of trade-offs, right? Is it terrible? Yes, absolutely, right? Is it going to be, a lot of fraction reserved? Yes, right? Are we going to see a lot of them failing? Yes, but it's not going to go away, right? It's just, that's just the reality, right? Like of how things are. The internet used to be a lot more decentralized. Everybody used to run their email server and their, like IRC server and everything. And then even IRC became fully centralized. There's like 2 massive players and that's it, right? And IRC never actually further into where it was supposed to go, which was the federated, where the servers would talk to each other. It failed that way. So it's just because the friction versus the risk versus the gain are just not there in value, right? Like, because reality is, through modern history, the majority of the people don't lose their money at the bank, right? Even though there are events, you could be the sucker that does. In most Western countries, like, people still have their money. I got mine taken in Brazil, but like, it's Brazil, so people will make different sets of trade-offs in Brazil. And there is a reason. It's the reason why, like, people put their money in all these yield stupid places where they give you, like, a few percent on your Bitcoin, because you're getting a few percent of their Bitcoin, and they're used to institutions not running away their money in a lawful country, right? So anyway, so my point is, a lot of the Bitcoin will be centralized. I don't think we can get away from that. That's just reality. I mean, you look at the amount of Bitcoins inside Coinbase is huge, right? And it's only going to grow. So we should accept, understand that, and try to improve that, and try to get more people away from that. Now, the other part is, how can we make the people who do want to save themselves, who are not necessarily in the 20%, right, in the Pareto principle, say they're in the 70%, right, or even the 60%, we can help them, at least with part of their funds. So phone wallets are going to be huge, right? So people are going to have their seed on a phone wallet. The problem is, phones are fully pound, right? Anyone can, like, at the airport, they can copy and get into your phone. They stick in a little machine and they'll get your data out. They might not be able to do it right there and then, but they'll send it to a lab, they'll get it out. So phones, but it's still an improvement, right? Now it needs to be, say, law enforcement that is the one who takes away from you. It's not just some dude on the street. And then, what we're trying to do now with the tap signer is, can we make a hardware wallet that's sub $50, so that your phone wallet doesn't have the private keys, or it has just half of the multi-sig of the private keys. So that further improves that, and it's just a tap. There's nothing else to do. There's no screen. It's cheap, and maybe the quorum is enough that if you lose it, it doesn't matter. You just send it to a new wallet, start again. And then hardware wallets per se, they are improving. The software is improving and getting easier. I don't think they will ever be easy in a way that like the sort of like the straw man of easiness exists, because it's similar to a computer, or to, you don't run your own email server. If you do, now there's no middle ground between running your email server or not running your email server, or you do it yourself, and nobody runs email server because they're pain in the ass. So I think will continue to happen is large economic actors in Bitcoin and a lot of plebes will run their own nodes and continue to self-validate and keep the network in check, right? Because otherwise Bitcoin fails. Miners will 100% run their own nodes, because for them it matters even more which fork they're spending their energy into, right? Developers will do the same. So there is enough incentives for enough people to maintain the network safe and have good solutions, and you keep on improving the solutions, right? So, like, Coldcard offers a certain set of trade-offs, but then, for example, maybe you want something that's a little bit easier, that you have to trust the vendor, then maybe you go to something cheaper like a ledger, right? Where it's closed source, you're trusting them, but it's a company with some reputation. You can put all the shit coins you want in it, right? And that's the value proposition in there, and people do go there. I mean, it's one of the ones that sells the most. But should a Bitcoiner that have real Bitcoin do that? No, right? And people do, as they sort of go through the rabbit hole, they do instinctively find their way, right? I always joke that, like, Ledger is my best sales funnel. People learn how to use a hardware wallet Ledger, and then they buy a Coldcard, and then they keep their shitcoins on their Ledger. The majority of the people will have shitcoins. It's not going away. It's only going to grow exponentially from now, right? Because every scammer, or every person who doesn't know he's a scammer yet, is going to want to create their scam, because it's just too easy. right? It's zero friction scamming. So those scamming markets will grow too, and it will take, like, it took, like, gold is what, like 2,000-3,000 years old in terms of like like human history using gold as a store of value, right? Like, the dollar is now 100 so years, right? Well, actually more. And you know I think it's just more options. The world will have more options. A lot of options will fail hard in the coming years because of the amount of shit show with modern economic theory. Um, but the tools and the evolution of Bitcoin tools will follow sort of like a traditional sort of way in which technology evolved, like how cars used to kill people by just going over a rock, and you jumped out until you figured out you could use a seatbelt and you can have airbags and all this stuff, and now you can go 140 and still not die. Um, like electricity is to kill in your house. Like, they have these amazing posters about how electricity kills, right? So, and people still don't understand how electricity works. Like, most people have no clue how the lamp turns on, right? So, but it does, and they trust it. So, and do they have their own power generation at home? No. Maybe we will when batteries get better. But anyways, in this whole convoluted explanation, my point is, things will evolve as the market requires it. Uh, like, we sell to like most Bitcoiners, right? And most Bitcoiners have no issues with the device and teaching their families and their kids and their grandparents and whatever, right? Like, somehow they all figured out. So I think as the feedback loop in the market improves, new products will come out, we will improve, and sort of like just slowly and surely things just keep on going.
Sorry, I was about to pull a P. In this scenario that we're talking about, though, will there, in your opinion, ever be a point where Bitcoin that's held by like individuals could maybe trade at or be valued higher than Bitcoin that's held by some third party custodian if we
No.
go down some path? No.
No, maybe now in scale because of friction, right? And sort of like the efficiency is not there. Bitcoin is a very sort of like inefficient market still. I mean, look at price discovery. It's two guys and a dog trading right now, and they can dunk the price like $20,000, right?
No, there's three dogs. It's two guys and three dogs.
Right, exactly. I mean, nobody's selling. I have not met a person who's selling, right? Like, it's like you look at the volumes of the exchanges, it's pathetic. So it's just like inefficient price discovery, right? Um, so so yeah, so it's just that I don't think if there was a difference in price for that same UTXO with the same sellability and the same fungibility, I think Bitcoin would fail, right? I mean, that could be a small premium here and there depending on the country you're in, right? But like, if you just sort of like, if you average out, right? Because maybe you live in a country where is super heavy-handed regulation, right, against free Bitcoin, let's put it this way, uncaptured Bitcoin. So maybe in your country there will be a premium, but like if you travel to another country to spend the Bitcoin, you'd be normal price, right? Like, it's just, it really depends on like where you are, but I think he averages out.
Well said. Q, unless you have any other questions, I think at this point we'll wrap it up. NVK, thank you so much for joining us. I want to give you the last word. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? And how should they check out your new podcast?
Right. Well, I mean, you can find me on Twitter at NVK. You can check out our products on CoinKite.com. And yeah, go listen to the new pod. And if you have new projects that you want to highlight it, that's the whole goal of this podcast. Just reach out on bitcoin.review. That's the domain.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we will be back with Craig Raw, creator of Sparrow Wallet.
Thanks for having me, guys.
See you in a minute.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks. Just want to quickly remind everyone, if you have not already bought your issue of the latest print mag, the censorship-resistant issue is available online at the Bitcoin Magazine store. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off of that and everything else available in the show. P, do you want to introduce our next guest?
Absolutely. We have Craig Raw with us, creator of, I would argue, one of the most interesting desktop wallets, wallet coordinator software out there. It does an amazing job of showing you enough information that you can figure out exactly what's going on with your Bitcoin transactions, but it also gives you enough breadcrumbs that it inspires you to go a little bit deeper and to understand the transactions in more detail. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. Excited to dive in.
Hi, guys. Great to be here.
Thank you so much. What would you add to that introduction? How did you get into the Bitcoin space? What inspired you to create Sparrow Wallet? And what led you to where you are today?
I would say what inspired me to get into it was really just, starting off just wondering how this thing could exist and how it could survive, and really trying to answer the question of, what's going to kill it. Tried for many years to figure that out. In the end, I couldn't find a way. So that just led to greater passion and interest. And that kind of led me eventually, so much time spent on it, spent thinking about it, that I just wanted to spend my time building something in the space. That's what I do. I create products. So I just wanted to create a product in the Bitcoin space, and a wallet seemed like the natural place to go. Mainly because at the time I was really battling to create a good multi-sig setup. I was trying to use the Electrum wallet to do that. And I ended up just sort of having to hack a whole lot of stuff together, writing custom scripts. And I just didn't like the way that it felt. It didn't feel very secure to me. So it's kind of where it began. It was just, a few little things on the edge, and then, one thing leads to another. I started building a wallet right at the start of COVID, had lots of time. It just kind of grew from there.
What led to some of the design decisions that you made specifically with Sparrow Wallet? Was that just an organic process in terms of what you wanted to see, or were you really consciously thinking about what might, entice people to learn more about their Bitcoin transactions?
So the way first of all, I want to say that I, primarily build Sparrow for myself, and I think about my own needs. I think that's the best way to build a product. That's not to say that every single thing I build is something that I, use a lot myself, but it's certainly a good place to start from. When I think about interacting with, the Bitcoin that I have, make transactions and so forth, I want to know what's going on. I have the sort of, you can call it the sort of hodler's fear, if you will, that when you have to make that large transaction, maybe you are moving from a less secure to a more secure setup, that you need to make a transaction to move your wealth. And that's a scary moment for anyone. And really, trying to, how do you reduce that fear? How do you make yourself stress less in that experience? How do you know you're getting it right? The only way to know is to A, know what you're doing, and B, have the information so that you can correlate that to what you know. Sparrow is really an attempt to give you that information and to provide some tools which can help you learn, can kind of, reveal things over time. So you're not bombarded with every piece of information from the start, but you can choose to dive in further and further. And that, I think, is a good way to learn, a good way to figure things out. But ultimately, it's really about trying to make it so that you can transact in a way that is not only feels like you know what you're doing, but also allows you to have the tools to be able to do it in a private and secure way as well.
I love it. What were the? I just love, like, I'm looking at the way that you lay out the UTXOs that are being combined, and then showing the change outputs, where it's going, and then, in fact, I'm just going to share my screen. This is a wallet that I created for the purposes of this conversation, and so I've gone in, I sent myself 2 transactions, just like a couple bucks or whatever, and I'm now at the send screen, or the send tab, and walk me through sort of like what we're seeing here and how someone should make a decision about this specific transaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're kind of looking at here is, you clearly have, if we go to the transaction diagram first, which I think is sort of a good way to be able to see what the transaction looks like, right? First of all, we have to understand the concept of that every Bitcoin transaction is a collection of outputs, one or more, and then that a collection of inputs, one or more, and then that through this transaction becomes several outputs plus the fee that must be paid. So that's really what we're looking at there. We're looking at the inputs there on the left and the outputs on the right, and they're kind of, the transaction diagram is just a way of being able to show you what's going on. So what we have here is 2 inputs, and it's going into a send output, which would be the address that you entered at the top, the amount that you've entered below it, and then additionally there's an output below it. That's the output in the middle, and that's your change output. So you are sending change back to yourself. And this is a fundamental part of how Bitcoin works, right? It's not an account in the classical sense. It is a system where we destroy every UTXO and create new ones with every transaction that we have. And if we don't have an exact amount to send, then we must send change back to ourselves. So that's kind of, one of these fundamental things, which is pretty basic for anyone who's been into this, and probably everyone who's listening to this chat, but it's not clear to everyone. And that's kind of wanting to sort of highlight these basics, I guess, is where it all begins. You can then take that information into more complex transactions like coin joins and sort of understand them and understand what's going on and how they can make you more secure. At the bottom of those outputs, it's actually not an output, it is the fee, but it's shown kind of as money going out. And that fee is then the amount that you pay to the miners for that transaction. So we can see in the sort of middle of that area, we can see and a place to adjust the fee rate, which is currently set to, I think, pretty low, but you can move that up. And if you move that up, you obviously get your transaction possibly processed faster. So that is an absolute, kind of value in sats, which you are then paying. And you can then see that you're hovering over now. That's the sort of fee graph. And if you go to the little toggle above it, you'll be able to see what the mempool currently looks like. So we can see that, that mempool, I'm sure we're all familiar with it now, but it's not sort of empty. We can see that there are some transactions in it, and that can give us an idea of how much it is that we are needing to spend on our fee. So that's kind of that view, is really just trying to give you all the tools that you need as you construct whatever transaction it is that you want to send.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I can't say it enough times. I think this is such a novel thing because I'm not aware of any other wallet or desktop wallet that gives you this much information in such a compact space. You know, I'm used to going and having to, you know, pull up mempool.space, look at the mempool, come up to my own conclusion about what fee I want to set. And just for the audience, you know, with a Bitcoin transaction, you basically get to decide how strongly you want to incentivize miners to put your transaction into the next block. So you get to choose, you know, if it's a transaction that, you know, is not super urgent, you can set it extremely low and then be confident that it will eventually get confirmed within a day or two. Apologies for the dog barking. If it's more urgent, you set a higher fee, and then basically miners are more likely to pull it into that block. And so this chart and the system you have here just makes it super clear and easy to understand, like how that's going to work and what competitive environment you're interacting with within the mempool at any given time. So tell me more about the privacy analysis part of this.
Sure. So, you know, it's actually pretty similar to what you get if you've ever been to the sort of Block Explorer. They kind of give you a little bit of information there at the bottom of every transaction. This is kind of similar to that, right? It's a pretty basic analysis. You know, I'm not going to claim that it's doing any kind of deep transaction graph analysis here, but it's just trying to give you some tips. So, for example, if you send to a different address type, now we can see from the address that we're sending to here that we're sending to a SegWit address. If your wallet is of a different address type, then the change will be going out to a different type. Now that's kind of clear to anybody looking at this transaction which of those two outputs is sending out and which of them is the change amount. So that's kind of giving you a little bit of information about how much you might be revealing when you send this. There's other information that you can get, like, for example, if you're sending out a round amount, then people can pretty much guess that if one is a round amount and the other one is kind of just a random number, that again, you probably know which one you are actually sending out of the wallet and which one is changed. So that's kind of what it's doing. It's just giving you a few tips that you might want to consider in order to keep yourself a little bit more private.
Very cool. Very cool. Q, you got any thoughts, questions?
I'm just waiting for my moment to share what I shared with you. I'm not yet ready to admit to Craig where I am in my Sparrow wallet journey. So you have to keep going for a little bit until I get more comfortable.
All right. Well, you know, what I kind of wanted to talk to you about is just, you know, multi-sig, obviously Sparrow wallet. I'm curious if there's other things that you'd like to, you know, share around the development of Sparrow wallet, kind of where it is, where you'd like to see it go. Where are you? That's actually an interesting question. What is next for Sparrow wallet? What are the features that you are most excited to add in there as we go forward?
You know, I think part of being a good application developer is not building too much. You know, my goal is to not try and cram everything that I can into this thing. You'll notice that there's a conspicuous absence of any layer 2. And that's just because I don't think that layer 2 solutions are really there yet. And I need to be fairly conservative with, you know, what I'm going to put in there. I don't want to be trying to chase something which is rapidly changing, which often breaks, which is going to create a lot of user issues. And I don't want to add a lot of features to the interface that make it more difficult to understand what is going on. That is a very important thing. You know, if before I add any button or any additional UI to what is already a pretty busy UI in some areas of the app, you know, I really take a step back and I kind of think about it a lot. And often the answer is just no. It's just not worth the confusion that that particular UI element might create. So I just want to kind of say that first is it's a pretty high bar. What I do a lot of the time is actually stuff that you can't really see. There's a lot of internal improvement going on right now. Just this week, I'm working on sort of optimization work, making sure that Sparrow can run on sort of older computers. Something which is quite interesting to think about is that as our CPUs are getting more advanced over time, so they are also becoming more insecure. And often the older CPUs that you can find actually have more provable security on them simply because they have less features.
Interesting.
So
I didn't realize that.
Making sure that Sparrow can run on those older computers is actually pretty important to certain people who have large amounts of funds to control, who really care about making sure that every layer of their stack is important. So as I say, it's really about the security that matters rather than building the latest feature. I don't want to be on the bleeding edge. I want to be conservative. I want to think carefully. A lot of the things that I added might seem relatively new in the world, but I mean, Samurai Wallet had BIP47 in for many years. It is a proven, well-known structure that's been around for a long time and stood, I think, the test of time. So that's kind of the way that I am looking at things. Is just kind of wanting to see what is out there, what makes sense, what looks like a good product, what is a successful product. One of the reasons I built Whirlpool in over the other CoinJoin solutions is simply because it is clearly an attractive product. You can see it growing over time. You can see the success. That's the kind of thing that I think I want for Sparrow, and I think Sparrow users want. So that's kind of the way that I think about it. I don't have anything major that I'm working on right now, but as I say, there's lots of work in terms of features anyway. But as I say, there's lots of work going on under the hood to really just make things more robust and more secure.
Got it. So just for the audience, BIP47 refers to reusable payment codes or paynims, which basically you can have a single address that people can send to, and it also still preserves your privacy rather than using a single Bitcoin address, which if you do that, then everyone can look up that address on a Blockchain Explorer and see all of the transactions that have happened associated with that. So it'd be like paying someone, and then they get full visibility into your bank account. Now, there's other solutions to this as well. That's why almost any modern wallet will give you a brand new address every time you go to receive a transaction. That's a way to preserve your privacy. And so paynims, BIP47 are sort of a way to do that while not having to give a different address every time. So one thing, Craig, you mentioned that you're not super convinced about layer 2 technologies. So the most dominant one is, of course, the Lightning Network. Talk to me more about what your concerns are there, or what it would take for you to feel like that was a robust solution. Because I certainly think of it as a super, super robust layer 2 that is being used every day.
Yeah, so I don't want to say that I'm, against Lightning. That's certainly not the take that I have. I stay very close to it. I try and read as much as I can about what's going on. I definitely am interested and hopeful that it will succeed. But there are certain areas of it that do concern me. I am worried that it has a tendency towards centralization, and I am concerned about the privacy. So both of those things, well, certainly the privacy side I know is being worked on, and I'm sort of very keeping very close tabs on that. But there's some way to go on that. Frankly, it certainly isn't there today, at least not for the receiver. Then there's just the robustness of sending payments. It's not as robust as we would like, and I think there's been lots of people who've done informal polls. I've certainly had experiences where payments haven't gone through. I've sat and tried to analyze why they are not going through, and there really aren't a huge number of answers. It's just the sort of overall feeling that I have right now is that it's still relatively early, and that's fine. That's we're in a long game here. I don't have any particular demands or deadlines that I'm thinking this thing needs to be ready for by. It's just a case of wanting to implement things that are robust, that are private, that kind of fit the idea of being financially sovereign that Sparrow is all about.
So, Craig, someone is asking for your Payname so that they can donate to the Sparrow project. Where can people throw you some sats?
Sure. The Payname they can use is just plus Sparrow Wallet, big S, big W, and it's on the donation page as well. But yeah, we've got a custom Payname on that.
Very cool. Interesting. So you also mentioned coin joins, and that's something that, as you mentioned, Sparrow supports natively. Can you walk us through, what a coin join is, what it attempts to do, and sort of why it's an important technology?
Sure. So, coin joins are really connected to the idea that every time you send a payment, you are revealing information about yourself, that you really have a lack of privacy on layer one. For example, if the classic example that everyone gives, which I think is still very real and very appropriate, is if you get paid your salary in Bitcoin and then you walk down to your corner store to buy some milk and you pay them using the UTXO, then the guy at the corner store knows how much you get paid, right? That's the classic example. Now, how do you avoid that particular piece of information getting out there? And there's a number of ways to do it, but one of the ways to do it is certainly to create some separation and some privacy within your UTXOs itself. So what you're trying to do here is to basically break the link between one UTXO and a different one by introducing some transactions in the middle, and those transactions are called coin joins. Coin joins are unique in the sense, and here I'll refer to the equal output kind, in that you're creating a transaction with other people. And in the equal output kind of those, you're creating an equal value outputs. That means if the three of us come together, put the same amount in, and we all get back the same amount, nobody can tell which of those UTXOs, when it comes out, belongs to who, right? From the outside, you just can't know. And that's really what a coin join is, right? It's about trying to break the deterministic links between the input UTXOs and the outputs. So once you've broken that link, you can then say, right, nobody can then know basically the source of these UTXOs and where they're going. Nobody can be quite so sure. Now, if you do several coin joins back to back, then you have what you call an anonymity set that is growing. So every time you're doing this, you could be one of 5 people or one of 25 people and so forth. So you kind of, that anonymity set grows over time. And typically, once you've done a few of these coin joins back to back, then nobody can really know exactly what the source of your funds are and where they have gone. So you can then spend those in a way that is private. And that's really what a coin join is about.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the trade-off between, absolute auditability, which is something that, in the Bitcoin space, people hold very sacred, right? The idea that there will only ever be 21 million, that comes with the trade-off of, potential privacy issues, and CoinJoin is one of the ways of attempting to address those issues. Would you agree with that, or would you modify what I just said in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it would be ideal if we had privacy on layer one, right? That would really be what we would all want, but we don't have that. For whatever reason, it hasn't been built in. And as a result, us application developers like Samurai Wallet, like myself, have had to build that in on the application layer. And CoinJoin is one of those solutions which is sitting at the application layer. So, yes, it is that. We have this imperfect privacy, and we have tools which we make available for people to improve the privacy that they have. But ideally, I would, tomorrow I would happily go with something which was more private on the base layer, so long as we had the same kind of auditability that we have today. Unfortunately, I don't think that that's in the offing. I don't think that that's likely to happen anytime. So, all we can do at this stage is encourage people to use the tools in order to remain private.
Yeah, absolutely. Which specific CoinJoin implementation does Sparrow use?
Sparrow uses Samurai's Whirlpool.
Okay, it does. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Samurai and the stuff that they're doing. Is it possible to set up, is it possible to set up Sparrow Wallet so that it is the coordinator for the CoinJoins as well? Or if you connect it to your own node, does it work to do that? Or do you have to use the Samurai?
So you actually kind of want to use the Samurai coordinator because you basically want to have as much liquidity as you can, right? Going back to what I said earlier, you want a large and non-set. And so if you think about it, every time you join a CoinJoin with new liquidity, but new UTXOs coming into the round, we've got what we call a backward-looking anonymity set. So that means that all of those UTXOs that have previously CoinJoined, you're going to be connected to a subset of those. And your UTXO could now be looking back part of that and non-set, right? So you want that to be as large as you can. And for that reason, it makes a lot of sense for us all to come to one kind of point and to create a big cloud there. If we have a whole lot of coordinators, then obviously that is more decentralized in a way that it also reduces the liquidity and the non-sets, because every time you do that, you kind of break it down. So definitely Sparrow is not looking to run its own coordinator. We're kind of trying for that reason to be in as large a cloud as we can, because that offers the most privacy to our users.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that when you're using Samurai Whirlpool, can't you run your own Whirlpool server, which still then allows you to participate in the general Samurai pools, but you're just maintaining your own private keys and control of your UTXOs? Or am I misunderstanding that?
So they are all clients. So basically, whether using the Samurai Android app, the Samurai Wallet CLI tool, as it's called, which can run on a small Raspberry Pi, for example, or you're using the Samurai GUI, which is sort of something you can run on a desktop, or in fact, if you're using Sparrow, all of those are all clients and they all connect to the same coordinator. So, you can interchange your clients, you can move seeds from one to the other, you can even mix on multiple clients, you can do various things, but they're all basically connecting to the same coordinator and they're all kind of the same client. They just have different interfaces and different platforms on which they can run.
Oh, interesting. So if you're using Samurai, or if you're using Sparrow, are you still in control of your private keys and your UTXOs the entire time?
Absolutely.
Oh no, you always are, right? It's the only thing that you gain by using. I'm sorry, I'm conflating it. The only thing that you gain by using the desktop Whirlpool coordinator, and if that's not the right term, I forget, is that you're not actually sending the UTXO information to the Samurai servers. Is that correct?
Well, with all of these Samurai tools, I believe you can also connect them to your own node setup. So if you use just the Android app, for example, you can connect that to your own node and you can mix off there. They're really just different clients which offer different features, right? So, Sparrow, I think, is got enough features in it. It's a fully featured wallet, whereas the Whirlpool GUI tool is really just for that one function, right? So it depends what you're kind of looking to do, what platform you want to run it on. The CLI tool is really quite interesting because you can run it on a low-powered sort of SBC, and I think that that's quite interesting for people who kind of want to just leave it running for a long period of time. Again, it's just a client, so you have to load your seed onto it, and then it'll just mix as and when it can. So yeah, it's really just about what what kind of client you want to use.
Yep. Okay. Got it. Appreciate it. We got a question from Cortic, who can play an incredible cello if you've not heard him, asking why TX0 is the most important aspect to understand Whirlpool.
Well, I don't know if it's the most important aspect, but let me explain what a TX0 is. So basically, whenever you want to put new Bitcoin into Whirlpool, again, to kind of make it more private, what you are looking to do is to effectively create this transaction, which creates a number of different outputs, which we call premix outputs. And those outputs serve as your sort of entry point into the Whirlpool itself. So all of that transaction is it contains all of the UTXOs that you want to send into Whirlpool. It contains a Whirlpool fee. It contains, of course, the mining fee, which every Bitcoin transaction has to have. And then it contains a number of, as I say, these premix UTXOs, which then go in. Now, these premix UTXOs are slightly higher in value than your normal Whirlpool mix output. So there's 4 pools that you can choose from, and every pool has a fixed size, right? So you've got in sort of Bitcoin terms, you've got a 0.05 pool, a 0.01 pool, a 0.5 pool, and a 0.001 pool. So you've got these different pools that you can choose from. And at the end of the day, you're going to get a number of UTXOs on the output of Whirlpool of whatever pool size you have chosen. Now, your premix UTXOs that you are creating in this premix transaction, this TX0, as I say, those will be of that pool size, but slightly higher, because the premix UTXOs actually pay for the Whirlpool transactions themselves. This is a key reason why, and this is actually something that confuses people most of the time they kind of get into it, is you send this premix in, and then you need to wait some period of time for new liquidity and a new TX0 from someone else to come in and then pay for a mixed transaction. So at first it'll be you, and then after that point, you'll be waiting for someone else. And that's actually good, because it ensures that we have people always mixing with fresh UTXOs, and we're not kind of sort of mixing with ourselves over and over and over, right? Which wouldn't provide the same level of privacy that we are trying to get. So that sort of TX0 is very important, because it provides the liquidity, and it not only provides the liquidity, but it provides the transaction fees for every single mixed transaction that then happens. And this is kind of a key feature of why Whirlpool is as well reviewed as it is, right? It's because it has certain structural built-ins, if you will, that ensure that things happen in a certain way. Now, that does mean that they take more time to happen, right? It means that people are kind of wondering, well, I've put my premix UTXO in, I've got my first mixed transaction out, but now I'm waiting for my second and my third, and it seems to be taking some time. And that surprises people. They're kind of used to, I should be able to get as many mixes as I want, whenever I want. But you actually want them to happen over time. And that's because if you imagine that if you've got 3 mixes, one block after the other, it will be pretty obvious to see what was going on. But if one is spaced, 10 blocks, another is 25 blocks, and so forth, you now becomes much harder. So you avoid that sort of timing analysis, which you could otherwise get. So, that's kind of diving into it a little bit of how the TX0 is fundamental in terms of not only ensuring you have a way to enter Whirlpool, but also ensuring that, the mixed transactions themselves are always structurally sound, and they provide this new fresh liquidity coming in order to ensure that the mixes are always kind of more, that they have a high degree of entropy.
Yeah, and just to set the stage again, we're talking about coin joins, which are a privacy-enhancing technology on that you can use with Bitcoin, because, you know, people love to say like, oh, Bitcoin is for black market bullshit. But the reality is a blockchain is a terrible, terrible thing to use if you're trying to do illicit stuff, because the whole idea of a blockchain is that every single transaction can be traced back to exactly where it came from, and, you know, where the change outputs went, and everything that happened before and then ultimately after that transaction was made. And so, and this is important for full auditability on layer 1 Bitcoin, which allows us to, you know, verify and guarantee that there will only ever be 21 million or however many Bitcoin have been issued so far. So coin joins are a way to preserve, or to attempt to preserve, one's privacy by basically putting it into this larger pool where it is essentially mixed into this large pool. So you get a large, as Craig said, anonymity set, which means that any one of the potential outputs could be from any of the participants in that pool. And so it allows you to, it makes it very economically infeasible for a government organization or for a chain analysis company to basically track to see like, okay, what did you know, P buy with this specific UTXO, which he sent from this wallet to this address, and that kind of stuff. So it's an important technology. Are there other privacy enhancing technologies on layer 1 that you're excited about?
You know, there's attempts to kind of reinvent things that I think, you know, the sort of danger is that we don't just go ahead and use the tools that we have today. I would really just love to see more wallets just implement the tools that are currently being built in. I'd love to see more BIP47 wallets out there. I'd love to see more Whirlpool clients. You know, are there sort of new tech or anything new coming around the corner? Obviously, Taproot is there. It does offer certainly more private multisig. I think that's interesting. I'm keeping close tabs on Musig 2 and the different constructions that we could have there. I think it's still a little way off before we know precisely where, you know, most people are going on that. But that's I guess the sort of number one that I think about when I think about how can we take advantage of something new coming in.
Love it. So let's shift back to the kind of initial frame of the conversation, which is sort of talking about Sparrow and multi-sig setups with Bitcoin. And, you know, for the audience, multi-sig, if you weren't listening earlier, it is a way for you to increase the security of your Bitcoin storage solution by basically having multiple sets of private keys. 2 of 3 is the most common, where in order to sign a transaction, in order to send Bitcoin from an address that you control, you require, you know, in this example, 2 out of 3 hardware devices or devices in order to sign those transactions. So people tend to distribute them geographically so that if someone breaks into your house or something, they can't just like, you know, $5 wrench you and then force you to give them your Bitcoin. So let's go back to sort of setting the frame for the novice user, Craig. What are some of the considerations that one should take into account when they're considering a multi-sig setup?
Sure. So I think, you know, the first thing is to consider is, you know, whether a multi-sig setup is right. You know, I personally think it's a good idea, but I don't think that it is right for somebody who's a complete beginner. I don't think you should go to a multi-sig setup on day one. I think you should probably start off with a hot wallet, work your way up maybe to a hardware wallet, and then a multi-sig setup from there. So that's kind of the way that I would think about it first. You know, there's sort of a way of thinking about it in terms of the value of funds that you control as well. You know, kind of if you're not controlling very many funds, then really a hot wallet is fine. If you're controlling your life savings, then maybe a multi-sig is the place you should start, right? I think, you know, in terms of multi-sig, there's a few things that I would think about from the start. I would think if you're going to probably be using a number of different hardware wallets to do it, although that's certainly not a requirement, but it is the norm. I would certainly think about using hardware wallets from multiple vendors, because one always worries about the sort of unlikely chance of there being some kind of a backdoor that could lead to sort of a sunset attack or something of that nature. If you're just using one hardware wallet vendor, I think it's very unlikely, but nevertheless, it's nice having the peace of mind that even if one hardware wallet has some kind of a vulnerability, if you're using three different kinds, then it doesn't really matter. Then that they would have to compromise two of those three in a normal multi-sig setup in order for your multi-sig, for your funds to be at risk. And the chances of that are just so low that you can essentially write that off. Then in terms of once you've set the wallet up, something that is not well understood and needs to be often repeated is that you need to make a backup of all of the sort of public keys, the XPubs in that wallet. And that's because every time you create a spending script for that wallet, you need the public key of that particular UTXO that you're trying to spend. Now that can be done either just by saving lots of copies of your encrypted Sparrow wallet all over the place, and the encryption that is used, as long as using a decent password, makes it pretty safe to do. But you can also write out the output descriptor for that wallet, which is also available on the settings tab in Sparrow, and that contains all of the XPubs within it. So that's just an important thing, because if you lose, for example, going back to this 2 of 3, one of those hardware wallets and you lose the seed, right? So you've lost everything that you know about that particular hardware wallet. You will then need at least the XPub for that wallet, so at least the public keys for it, in order to construct a spending script and being able to move your funds. So that's the other thing that's really important, and I think there's some repeating. In terms of multi-sig itself and just making sure that you kind of getting the most out of it, something that I particularly value is the ability to separate the devices in a geographic way. So, it's strange that people from different parts of the world have different concerns and different threat models, or perhaps it isn't strange, it's quite obvious, but I certainly always found it interesting. From where I am, I consider the sort of the classic $5 wrench attack to be a threat model that does concern me. And as a result, I really value the ability to geographically separate the wallets that I have, because it just makes it that nobody can, it makes effectively that $5 wrench attack so much more difficult to execute. For example, if somebody has to travel to a different country, that might make your funds quite difficult to access. But for cold storage funds, you shouldn't be trying to access them very frequently anyway. So, what I like to do is to make sure that you're going to have to jump through some hoops if you want to move your cold storage funds, but that's fine, because it makes any kind of an attack really, really hard to execute. And that's one of the things about multi-sig that I really like.
Yeah, I think you made a great point that there needs to be a threshold above which one considers multi-sig. If you're just sort of starting out, you need to go through the steps and make sure that you're fully comfortable with and deeply understand the trade-offs there, because multi-sig, as you said, is more complicated. You do have to track more information. It's not enough just to have a backup of those seed phrases. You also need the XPubs or an encrypted Sparrow, backup, as you were saying. And so, when I first set up multi-sig, when I first set up a hardware device, I created the seed phrase, wiped the device, restored it, sent myself a transaction, sent it back. And, with multi-sig, I think it's really important that people also go through those steps with test amounts before they commit a significant amount of Bitcoin to any specific, scheme, because it is about, Bitcoin is, among many things, about kind of radical personal financial responsibility. And there is no one who can, reverse your transaction or give you back your funds if you fuck it up. So don't fuck it up. There's incredible guides out there.
I think that's a great point that you make there. Any wallet that you set up, before you trust any actual funds to it, always send test transactions to it. And once you have your cold storage set up, don't just leave it alone and say, oh, well, it's good. Do regular transactions to it. Do a scheduled one, no matter how difficult you make it for yourself. Go to the time and expense of ensuring that you do a regular test spend from that wallet. You can send the funds back to yourself, but just make sure that you know what's going on, because we're all human. Our brains do forget things over time. And just that regular practice, I think, is very important.
I mean, it also makes a great excuse to travel, right? If you've got, your signing devices in multiple countries, I mean, you have to fly around the world, once a year or something, and just test them out. Otherwise,
sure.
You've been incredibly quiet this entire time. I know you are bursting at the seams with.
I mean, to be honest with you, I was doing a little bit of macro research, and like my heart sank and seeing a couple of things but I think I am now reached a point where I'm comfortable admitting to Craig just how much of a pleb and noob I really am at this stuff. So Craig, I actually, like, full disclosure, like, I'm a jackass when it comes to my self-storage. As I mentioned, NVK, like, I have a Coldcard that I've not even taken out of the packaging for reasons that are genuinely valid in my opinion, and I don't give a shit what anyone says. What, Chris?
Keep going.
Anyways, so jackass over here still uses Wasabi and was shamed by both P and our producer, and they highly suggested I use Sparrow. I was like, fuck yes, give me a new solution. Let's go. Give me something better. Craig, why did you have to shame me in the moment I like trying to set this up and living at my parents' place? I do not have a node here. So jackass, like, I got so overwhelmed in the setup process and so shamed by just the color scheme you have introduced. So I want to maybe unlock this a little bit. And while I may know some of the answers to these questions, just entertain me while I ask them. Why'd you make me feel like such an asshole for not running my own node?
Great question. Yeah, so, I think the important thing here is that if we look back, the biggest discussions and worries and concerns that, many people in Bitcoin had, if you look back like 6-7 years ago, is that not enough people are going to run their nodes, right? If we don't run enough nodes, then effectively, what's the point, right? We just have a something which is not robust, which is not decentralized. It's really important to run your own node for the health of the network, and secondly, and perhaps just as importantly, for your own privacy, right? If you are not running your own node, you are using someone else's node, and you are trusting them with not only with your privacy, but also, with the ability to transact. That is not a good thing. And that, to P's point, Bitcoin is a journey of financial personal responsibility. And if you're using someone else's node, then that's a step that you still need to take. So it's really important to work your way up to it. There's many people who will start off by connecting to a public server, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine from day one. I kind of recognize that everyone is on their own journey, and you need to get to that point over time, right? You don't want to have to do step 10 before you've done step 1. So connect to that server, but know that you are sharing that information and that your transactions are dependent on someone else. So work towards the point where you can run your own node, right? That's kind of the clear goal here that everyone who is connecting to someone else's node needs to at least be thinking about. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I got to say, I am a huge fan of the way that you communicate all the information, as I said at the beginning, and specifically around running your own node. So my answer would be Q, you got to get your shit together and suck it up and teach yourself how to run your node when you're able to,
There's a valid reason that I don't want to publicize.
It's a terrible reason. That is a terrible reason.
I think the valid reason.
But yeah, I think to Craig's point, it is super important that as many people as possible are running their own nodes. It is so important that even as adoption of Bitcoin surges, for all the reasons we talk about on this show all the time, we also need to be encouraging people to be self-sovereign and to run their own nodes, to set up their own hardware devices, to understand how they work. Because as we've seen with these recent blowups with places like Celsius, Three Arrows Capital, if you don't have control of your keys and you're not setting these things up yourself, you're ultimately just trusting somebody else with that information and to do it for you. And that is a huge risk both to yourself, to your own finances, and to the Bitcoin network. So I'm a huge fan of the fact Sparrow Wallet makes it so clear, and I think it does a good job of explaining the risks that are involved. So if you felt shame, it's because you should feel shame. You are a shameful person. Shame on you.
I mean, honestly, Cortic brings up a great point. P, let me use your node.
You absolutely can. I'll
But to Craig's point, like, my journey to Bitcoin is different than everyone else's. Do I feel shame? Yes, it's part of the reason why I
you
didn't
shouldn't
want to
feel shame.
But like, I also kind of recognize, like, that is the next step of my journey. And quite frankly, there are just a couple of, I don't give a shit if you don't agree with my logic or not. My logic is what makes sense in my brain, and so
Sure.
therefore it's what I will use.
There's
There's a larger, like, without explaining the whole nuances of it, like, I want to keep my KYC Bitcoin and my non KYC Bitcoin completely separate. Like, there is that is genuinely my rationale to all of this.
All right. Our producer, Chris, said he's going to fly down to where you are and help you set it up, because that's a terrible excuse. You can absolutely start playing with this stuff, messing around with it, and learn the process so that you're ready to do that when you're ready.
I'm trying to hide my wealth. Eventually, I'm going to have to deal with all the KYC Bitcoin I bought. So I'm trying to go full blown Odell here and like go non KYC.
And yet you're talking about it actively on this show.
I mean, like, I'll send my UTXO address and everyone can try to come and find me.
All right. What other aspects of we talked about the specific technologies that you're excited about, Craig, in terms of privacy enhancing technologies. You talked about Musig or Musig 2, and we were talking previously with NVK about, I'm really excited about threshold signatures. And I'm just curious, what other aspects of Bitcoin, not necessarily associated with privacy, as I asked before, are you excited about? What technological developments do you think are the most promising right now?
Well, the one that I'm really hoping about is that we're gonna see more active development on is cross-input signature aggregation. That for me is the soft fork I would be behind. It's what that is effectively every time we create a Bitcoin transaction, every input that we were talking about earlier needs to have a signature on it. And that signature is the largest part of a Bitcoin transaction in terms of bytes, right? So when we're talking about a blockchain, which is half a terabyte in size, most of that half a terabyte is signature information. So it represents a lot of weight that everyone has to transmit and has to store. If we can find a way to reduce that anyway, then we can not only make the blockchain more scalable, which I think is always important, but it actually has certain other things which are very interesting as well. So one way to do that is to take all of those signatures, every one for every input, and to basically combine them all, just to add them all together. Now, Taproot uses a kind of signature called Schnorr, and Schnorr has this very interesting property to it where you can actually add all of these signatures together, and then you can verify the entire thing. That means that we can effectively, for every transaction where we do this, we have, instead of having one signature per input, we have one signature per transaction. Now, you can imagine how much blockchain space we can save with this, right? But the really interesting additional thing that this gives us is it actually makes privacy-focused transactions cheaper. Because now, all of a sudden, if I come together with UP and UQ, and we create a transaction together, we can then all add inputs to that, have one signature to it, and we can all share the transaction fee, right? So do you see how that suddenly cuts the transaction fee in a third, right? And not only does that create a more private transaction because we're now all adding inputs and that breaks the common ownership heuristic, but also it is cheaper, right? So usually changes to Bitcoin do not really take off unless there is a financial incentive for them. And cross-input signature aggregation creates a financial incentive for cheaper, for more private transactions. And that for me is really important, right? That's the way that you get change to actually happen. So I'm really hoping to see more work on that. It's going to require a sort of a PR. It's going to require a soft fork to make that happen. It's certainly not a simple piece of work, but I really hope that that's the work that starts to get more attention in the coming months.
Yeah, I love that. I think the beauty of Bitcoin, or one of the many beauties, but to me, one of the things that is the most exciting, as I talk about a lot on the show, is just the incentive structures. And so I completely agree that until there is a financial incentive for people to use more private transactions, it's not something that will catch on in a significant way. So it's a great answer. It's a fantastic answer. Well, I wonder if, I'm curious if there are, actually, let me frame the question in a different way. I just asked, what are you most excited about in the Bitcoin space right now? What do you think is the largest threat to Bitcoin in today's world, given where we are?
To be honest, I think that there is, I sit on the Bitcoin dev list, and I really worry about the level of conversation that I see there. I worry that, if we have too much fragmentation and division within the Bitcoin community working on Bitcoin, then we may very well have a situation where Bitcoin ossifies sooner than we might ideally like it to. Now, that might be fine. It might be that Bitcoin is kind of okay as it is, but I don't necessarily believe that to be true. I think that, it is, there are all kinds of improvements being worked on. Some of them, less controversial than others, sure. But if it becomes too difficult to make change, then people will simply give up. And that's not an altogether bad thing. There's certainly certain pros to that. But I do hope that it doesn't happen sooner than it otherwise should. So, for example, if we are going to see, cross-input signature aggregation happen, it could very well be blocked simply because people come up with all kinds of spurious arguments of why it isn't good, right? That does worry me to some extent, because it does seem to be that there's just a lot of voices these days who come up with sort of intellectual masturbation, if you will, on certain points that seem to not really have any particular useful purpose to them. And I think that, that could be viewed as an attack on Bitcoin itself. Just, kind of throwing FUD in there, throwing a lot of noise in there, and just making it difficult for anyone to get anything done.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I would strongly encourage everyone that's listening to follow Craig, check out Sparrow Wallet. Craig, where can people follow you? Where can they download Sparrow Wallet?
Sure. You can follow me pretty much everywhere on at Craig Raw. And you can find Sparrow Wallet at sparrowwallet.com, all one word. So just the word Sparrow, the bird, and sparrowwallet.com. And that's pretty much where you can get it. You can find the GitHub and all of those things. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to promote or shill before we end today? Any other comments you want to leave the audience with?
Not really. I think the most important thing is, to ensure that you just kind of follow the kind of now well documented process of becoming a true kind of Bitcoiner, in the sense of getting your coins off an exchange, getting them onto a wallet that you control, controlling the private keys, making sure you run your own node queue. Just don't stop. Don't feel that you have to get all the way to, as I said, step 10 at first, but don't stop that journey. Keep working at it. Keep trying to understand, use the privacy tools, learn them, because you don't want to need them when it's too late. So start figuring all of those sorts of things out. I often get asked, oh, it's too complex for me, I don't understand. But you can understand the first step. You can get into it. You can start, and don't get overwhelmed. Just pick away at it, and it will eventually make sense.
I'm gonna hold myself accountable and say, Craig, the next time either we see each other or speak again, I promise to have improved my own journey.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us, man. P, I keep just stealing the wind out from under you, so I'll mute myself.
No, you're good, man. I was just going to say, reminder to the audience, Bitcoin Amsterdam is coming up. It's going to be absolutely incredible. If you have not already got your tickets, go to b.tc/conference and you'll be able to check that out. We have a new edition of Bitcoin Magazine out right now, the censorship resistant issue, which again, I'm super proud of it. It is by far and above the best magazine, the best edition we've produced so far. So check that out as well. Other than that, that's all we got. We will see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a great day.
Who's our guest tomorrow?
Who is our guest tomorrow? I do not have my calendar in front of me. You tell me. Who is it?
We have JP Barrick.
Yes, JP Barrick. We're going to be talking about mining.
And then we'll also have Jimmy Song. So, yeah, you're not going to want to miss it. All right, I need to go poop. Let's wrap.
Jesus. Thank you, Craig.